Hello everyone, welcome to Paranormal M. I'm glad you're here for another video. If you enjoy these stories, please give the video a like. And if you have your own unexplained paranormal experience, you can send it to me. The first story tonight is about two houses connected to one family, and the strange things that seem to follow the people who live there. Nothing too dramatic at first, just that quiet feeling that something is off. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin. I hope you all sleep well tonight. You know, my dad and my aunt grew up in the same old family house. And by the time my parents got married and had me and my brother, most of my dad's family was still connected to that place somehow. We were there constantly in the summers, especially on weekends, because the house had this beautiful in-ground pool out back with a diving board, and everybody would show up for cookouts. It was one of those places that should have felt warm and busy and safe. But even as a kid, I remember feeling like something was off. Nobody ever sat me down and said, "Hey, this house is strange," or anything like that. I didn't know any of the stories yet. I just knew I hated going inside alone. If I had to use the bathroom, I would make my brother or one of my cousins come with me and stand right outside the door until I was done. Nothing actually happened to me in there. I never saw anything. I never heard anything. It was just this heavy feeling, like the house was watching from the corners. Years later, when I was older, my dad and the rest of his family finally started telling us what they had experienced there. The house was a ranch-style place, with 3 bedrooms all lined up off the same hallway. My dad said that at night, something would walk up and down that hall. He could hear it moving, and while it moved, it would scratch along the walls. Back and forth. Back and forth. He also told me once that he saw a dark, hooded figure in the house. He didn't know what it was exactly, but he said he could feel something awful coming from it. Not just scary, evil, like the air around it had gone bad. Eventually, the house changed hands within the family. My cousin's in-laws bought it first and remodeled the whole place. Later, after they moved into a retirement community, my cousin and her family bought it from them. I go over there pretty often now, and honestly, I don't feel that same thing anymore. The upstairs and main rooms feel normal now. But the basement? No, absolutely not. That part of the house still makes my skin tighten. I always feel like whatever used to be upstairs has settled down there instead, tucked away in the dark like it's waiting. My cousin's daughter has mentioned that she's experienced a few things too, though thankfully nothing too terrible. The second story is about another family house, the one that used to belong to my great-grandmother on my mom's side. I remember her really clearly, because my grandmother used to watch me and my brother when we were little, and she took us over there all the time. My grandmother's younger brother, Uncle Carl, lived with my great-grandmother. He never married, and he helped her take care of the house. He was quiet, dependable, and always around. When my great-grandmother passed away, the house went to Uncle Carl. Not long after that, my parents were getting ready to host a family reunion at our house. The day before, my dad was steam cleaning the carpets. He was being careful and walking backward while he cleaned, so he wouldn't leave footprints in the wet carpet. When he finished, he turned around to put the cleaner away. Then he looked back. There were boot prints in the carpet. He didn't think much of it at first. He figured maybe he had done it somehow and just hadn't noticed. So he got the cleaner back out, went over the carpet again, smoothed everything out, and put the machine away. Then he turned around. The boot prints were back. Same kind of marks, right there in the freshly cleaned carpet. He still tried to brush it off. He cleaned them one more time and went on with the rest of the house, probably telling himself there had to be some normal explanation. The next day was the reunion. It hadn't even been a year since my great-grandmother had died. Uncle Carl showed up late, which was strange because he was never late. He also seemed a little off, like something was weighing on him. Later that day, he collapsed on my parents' kitchen floor and died from a massive heart attack. After that, another uncle of mine bought my great-grandmother's house so it would stay in the family. He moved in with my aunt and their little boy, Kyle. Kyle was very young at the time, probably around 3 or 4, and he ended up sleeping in Uncle Carl's old room, which was the only bedroom upstairs. A little while after they moved in, my aunt heard Kyle upstairs playing with his toy cars and talking to someone. When she asked him who he was talking to, he said, "My friend Carl. He's playing cars with me." And that was the part that made everyone go quiet, because Uncle Carl loved cars. Not just regular cars either, racing cars. He and another great uncle had owned a racing parts shop, and Uncle Carl even had a garage at the house where he worked on race cars. Kyle didn't know any of that. He was too little. Nobody had sat him down and told him stories about Uncle Carl and his cars. Then one day, my aunt found Kyle coming down the stairs backward. She panicked, grabbed him, and told him he should never be on the stairs without a grown-up. And Kyle just looked at her and said, "Carl told me to go down backwards so I wouldn't get hurt." I still get chills when I think about it. Both houses had their own kind of darkness, but that second one felt different. Less like something trying to scare us, and more like someone who had stayed behind to look after what he loved. I still think about this sometimes, and honestly, it's one of the scariest things that ever happened to me. I was around 10, and my little brother, Nate, was about 7. We were both really into spooky stuff back then. We loved ghost stories, scary movies, anything that gave us that nervous little thrill. One day, we picked up some kind of game from a movie or a show, and while our mom was busy inside the house, we slipped out into the garage. We climbed into the car, turned off all the lights except that small light in the middle of the ceiling, and started playing. At first, it was just kids being kids, laughing, trying to scare each other, acting braver than we actually were. But somehow, after going in and out a few times, we ended up in the trunk again. And this time, it wouldn't open. I remember the exact moment I realized we were trapped. That cold flash of panic hit me, even though the trunk itself was hot and stuffy. I started kicking at the side panel because I'd seen something on TV about emergency features in cars, where you could kick out a weak spot near the trunk light if you were trapped inside. But our car was older. There was no safety panel. All I did was kick out the trunk light. So then we were trapped in total darkness. It got hot so fast. The air felt thick, like it was disappearing every time we breathed. We were both panicking, and that made it worse. I could hear Nate struggling beside me, crying, pushing, trying anything he could think of. And then something in me just stopped. I stopped kicking. I stopped yelling. I stopped fighting. I lay there in the dark, and this strange calm came over me. Not peaceful exactly, but empty. I remember thinking, this is it. We're going to die in here. I started thinking about my life, which is such a strange thing for a kid to do. I thought about my mom, my family, the people I'd never see again, the things I'd never get to grow up and do. But Nate didn't stop. He kept fighting the whole time. He managed to wedge his little arm between the back seats and tried to reach the latch. He couldn't open it, but the space he made let in the tiniest bit of air. That little gap might honestly be the reason we survived. Afterward, his arm was bruised from shoulder to wrist, black and blue all over. While I was lying there listening to him struggle, I heard a voice. Not out loud. Not like someone was standing beside us. It was inside my head. and it told me everything was going to be okay. It told me I had lived the best life I could for my age, and that no matter what happened, whether I lived or not, things would still be okay. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds impossible, but I heard it clearly, and Nate didn't hear anything. A few moments later, my mom came into the garage. She had been inside deep cleaning, talking on the phone with my grandmother, when suddenly she got this overwhelming feeling that she needed to check on us. Not later, right then. The strange part is, she went straight to the car. That still gives me chills. We had never played in that car before. We didn't usually play in the garage. There were so many other places she could have checked first, but somehow, she just knew. She opened the trunk and found us. To this day, she says she can't explain it. She just had this sudden feeling, this instinct, like something pushed her toward us. And honestly, I think whatever spoke to me in that trunk also tapped my mom on the shoulder and told her, "Go check on your kids." Years later, I heard that voice one more time. I was about to cross the street with my headphones on, and inside my head, I heard it tell me not to take another step. I hesitated for just a second, and right then, a car flew through the crosswalk. If I had stepped forward, it would have hit me. I've never heard the voice again after that. I know it sounds wild. I know people might think it's just my brain trying to make sense of fear, but I really believe it was something watching over me. Maybe an ancestor, maybe a guardian spirit, maybe an angel. I don't know. But I do know this. Somebody or something was there, and I've never forgotten it. So yeah, don't play games with things you don't understand. Don't go knocking on doors unless you're ready for whatever might be waiting on the other side. When I was in 5th grade, my family lived in this little townhouse, and I swear, that place had a strange feeling to it from the start. My parents had been divorced for a few years by then, so it was my mom's place. She worked night shifts, which meant a lot of the time it was just me and my 3 siblings home alone after dark. Our bedrooms were upstairs, right near the staircase, and my mom's room was farther down the hallway. One night, it was around the time my mom usually got home, and we heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Not a little creak, not the house settling, actual footsteps. My sister and I got excited because we thought it was our mom, so we ran over to the stairs, ready to hug her when she came up. But nobody was there. The downstairs was completely dark. No lights, no sound, nothing. We called out for my mom, but there was no answer. She clearly wasn't home yet. My sister and I were so shaken up that we couldn't even go back to bed. We just stayed awake, waiting. And the second my mom finally came through the door, we told her exactly what had happened. Then there was another time, in that same house, around Christmas. My mom used to hang little bells on all the doors, so whenever someone opened one, you could hear it. I was playing on the stairs by myself when I heard bells ringing upstairs. I looked up, expecting someone to come out of a room, but nobody did. So I went upstairs to check. There was no one there. Then the bells on my brother's bedroom door started moving. And I don't mean they gave a tiny little wiggle, like from a draft or something. They were swinging, clearly swinging. I just stood there, staring at them, thinking maybe someone had opened the door and moved them. I waited for my brother to come out, or for one of my siblings to pop out laughing. But nobody came out. Then, while I was still watching, the bells moved again, right in front of me. No hand, no door opening, no reason. I ran downstairs so fast I probably touched 3 steps total. My siblings were all in the living room watching TV, and my mom was in the kitchen. Nobody had been upstairs. I tried telling everyone what happened, but nobody wanted to come check with me. They just brushed it off. So I tried to convince myself it was probably my older brother hiding one of his friends in his room or something, because he was always the rebellious one. That was the only explanation my brain could tolerate at the time. But honestly, I never really believed it. Years later, I lived in Okinawa, Japan, and that place had its own kind of heaviness. There are so many haunted stories connected to the island, especially because of World War II. At the time, my then-boyfriend Mason had just been stationed there, and he was living in the Air Force ammo dorms. I think the building had 4 floors. I stayed there with him for a while, and one night he was asleep, but I was still awake. Out of nowhere, he sat straight up in bed and pointed toward the corner of the room. I asked him, "What are you pointing at?" He didn't answer. He just kept pointing for a moment, then laid back down and went right back to sleep. The strange thing is, I wasn't as terrified as I probably should have been. I had already dealt with weird things before, plus I'd had a lot of sleep paralysis experiences, so I told myself he was probably dreaming. The next day, I asked him about it. He didn't remember anything. A few nights later, I had a dream about a shadow figure crouched on top of the fridge, sitting there like some kind of gargoyle. It had red eyes. Again, I tried to brush it off. I told myself, it was just a dream. Don't make it into something bigger. But months later, after Mason and I had gotten married and moved into a house on base, we had some friends over. A lot of them had either lived in those dorms or knew people who had. At some point, one of them casually mentioned having a dream about a shadow figure with red eyes. I froze. I told them what I had seen in my dream, and then other people started sharing their own stories. One by one, people admitted they had seen the same kind of figure, or dreamed about it, or felt something strange in those dorms. By the end of the conversation, everyone had chills. It was just too specific. Too many people had experienced the same thing. And Okinawa already had this reputation for haunted places. Americans would go ghost hunting there, treating it like an adventure, but the locals usually wouldn't mess with those places at all. They knew better. The ammo area had stories too. People talked about phone calls coming from abandoned buildings and lights being on in places where the power should have been gone for years. I never went looking for anything after that. Some places don't need to be investigated. Some places already know you're there. Honestly, I'd try not to panic too much about the torn shirt. Clothes just aren't made the way they used to be, and a rip can happen so easily. It could have snagged during the move, or even torn when you pulled it out of a drawer, a bin, or wherever you had it stored. I know it can feel unsettling when it happens at the wrong moment, but I wouldn't let that one detail feed your fear. And that's kind of the big thing here. Whether there is something spiritual going on or not, fear is not something you want to keep handing over. If there is an entity, don't give it a buffet of anxiety. The same goes for the mold concern. In one of my old places, we had a serious mold problem and somehow never smelled a thing. Later we found out there was a slow leak inside the wall from the upstairs neighbor's shower. So if hiring a professional isn't realistic right now, it might still be worth looking up simple ways to check for hidden moisture or mold. Sometimes the creepiest explanation is just plumbing wearing a tiny villain cape. I'm not saying you're making things up, and I'm definitely not saying there couldn't be something spiritual happening. I'm just saying it's really important to rule out the ordinary stuff first. In my experience, physical problems can be way more stubborn and Drandis than spiritual ones. I learned that the funny way, actually. My last apartment had belonged to a man named Robbie who had passed away, and for weeks I kept hearing this faint scratching sound on the wall every morning and again in the evening. I checked for mice. Nothing. I checked for loose wires. Nothing. For a while, I was completely convinced Robbie was still hanging around. Then one day, I finally realized it was my prayer plant. The leaves were opening and closing with the light at sunrise and sunset, and they were brushing against the wall. I had spent almost a month side-eyeing a houseplant like it was a haunted roommate. So, once you've ruled out the environmental things and the strange stuff still keeps happening, then yes, there are ways to clear out unwanted energy or spirits. Usually, it isn't as hard as people imagine. The first thing is to stop feeding it negative emotion. Remind yourself that you are alive, you are grounded, and you are stronger than whatever might be lingering there. It cannot just take power from you, unless you keep offering it fear. If you feel drained, do something small to bring yourself back into your body. Take a short walk. Drink tea. Sit in the sun for a few minutes. Put on clean clothes. Open a window. Something simple that tells your nervous system, I'm still here. I'm okay. If you're sad, let yourself feel it, but try to understand where it's coming from. Don't let it turn into a swamp you sit in all day. Feel it, name it, and then gently move yourself towards something steadier. After that, make your home feel less welcoming to heavy energy. Declutter as much as you can. Give the place a good deep clean. Burn incense if that feels right to you, or use smoke cleansing, or whatever cleansing method fits your beliefs. Open the windows while you do it and let the house breathe. And honestly, bring in some life if you can. A pothos, a snake plant, or a little succulent can help the space feel fresher and calmer. Plants have a way of making a room feel less like a closed box and more like a place that remembers the sun exists. Then, when you're ready, speak with intention. Go room by room and tell whatever is there that it is not welcome and it has to leave. I was raised Christian, even though I'm not exactly Christian anymore, and the phrase that still works for me is, "In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, I command you to be gone." I still see Jesus as spiritually meaningful and connected to goodness, so those words carry weight for me. But if that doesn't match what you believe, use words that do. You could say, "In honor of all that is good and in the light of life, I command you to leave this home." Or something else that feels strong and true in your own mouth. It might feel awkward at first. You might feel ridiculous standing in your hallway talking to the air. That's okay. The point isn't to perform perfectly. The point is to mean it. Say it with conviction. Say it like the house belongs to you, because it does. And whether the problem is spiritual, emotional, or something hidden in the walls, you'll be taking your power back one step at a time. I want to tell you about something that happened with our second oldest boy, Milo, when he was around 6 years old. He was sick that day, running a fever, and honestly, the whole thing still sits with me in a way I've never been able to fully explain. Before I get to that part, there's a little background you need to know. For about 5 years, our family lived in a house that belonged to my close friend's parents. To me, they were more than just family friends. They were almost like a second mom and dad. I had known them most of my life, and they had always treated me like one of their own. Both of them eventually passed away in that house, a couple of years apart. And behind the house, not far from the back door, they were laid to rest in a small mausoleum. So their presence, in one way or another, never really felt far away. Now, I should say this clearly. I'm a skeptic. I've always been the kind of person who wants a real explanation for things. I'm in my 50s now, and I still think that way. But there were things that happened in that house that were hard to brush off. Not just things I noticed either. My wife had experiences. Other family members did too. Even my friends' parents had talked about strange things before they died. A few years before they passed, they asked me to come over and check the upstairs and the attic. They were convinced something was up there. My second dad told me, very seriously, that he thought it was ghosts and that he had somehow made one of them angry. So I went up there. I checked everything. The rooms, the corners, the attic space, all of it. And I found nothing. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. I didn't feel anything strange. The only thing I remember noticing was a Bible sitting right there in the attic, placed near the opening, almost like someone wanted it to be the first thing you saw when you lifted the lid. The reason they asked me, and not their own son, was simple. He had moved to another state for work, and I was nearby. I helped them with things the way a son would. Later on, though, I found out he probably wouldn't have gone upstairs anyway. He was too afraid of that part of the house. But back to Milo. He was lying on the couch, burning up with fever, restless and miserable. My wife was taking care of him. He had a wet cloth on his forehead, and he kept holding his head like it was pounding. Then he started saying, "Mommy, those kids won't stop running on the roof. They're making my head hurt." My wife knew there weren't any children on the roof. There was no one upstairs either. She figured it was the fever talking, that half-dreaming, half-awake state kids can get into when they're really sick. She tried to calm him down, then went into the kitchen to rinse the cloth again. When she came back, Milo looked calmer. He said, "It's okay now, Mommy. The nice lady told the kids to stop." That made my wife pause. She asked him, "What lady?" He told her he could still see her. So my wife asked him to describe the woman, and when he did, she said she nearly dropped right where she stood. In one of the bedroom drawers, we kept a laminated obituary card with a picture of my second mom on it. My wife went and got it, brought it back to the couch, and showed it to Milo. He pointed to the picture. That was the woman he had seen. After that, I started noticing a pattern. The activity in the house seemed to pick up whenever one of the children was sick. Another time, our youngest was home from school, lying on the couch not feeling well, and I was there for that one. I won't get into every detail right now, but there was a sudden rush of activity through our bedroom, the kitchen, and the utility room. It felt like the whole house had woken up at once. The strange thing is, none of it ever felt cruel. Unsettling, yes. Hard to explain, absolutely. But not threatening. We just learned to live with it. There were other experiences too. A few of them still make me shake my head. My daughter had one she told us about. My twin nieces had their own stories, and one of their fiancés did too. Some of those stories had a little danger in them, and some had humor, which feels strange to say about a haunted house, but it's true. That house had a personality, and whether I can explain it or not, I know what my son said he saw that day. A sick little boy asked for peace, and somehow, that nice lady gave it to him. I don't remember much from when I was little. Honestly, I don't know if I remember any of it clearly. But my parents remembered. They remembered everything. According to them, when I was really young, I used to talk about seeing things around the house. Not in a dramatic way. I wasn't screaming or hiding under blankets. I'd just mention it casually, like it was completely normal. There was one figure in particular I used to talk about. I called him the gentleman. My parents said he wore a neat, old-fashioned hat and carried a folder tucked under his arm, almost like he was on his way to an appointment. I'd point him out sometimes and say things like, "He's standing over there," or "He's watching us," or "He just walked past." To me, apparently, it was no stranger than noticing someone crossing the room. My parents were religious, so they believed I might have been seeing a spirit. But since I never seemed afraid of him, they didn't think of him as something bad. My mother always said there was a calmness around the whole thing, at least from my side. I just accepted him. There's one story my dad used to tell that always stuck with me. mostly because he was the kind of person who believed in things, but still wanted a logical explanation. He liked science. He liked reason. He liked being able to say, here's why that happened. But this one, he never really explained. I was still a baby then, too young to talk. One night, I was restless and crying, the way babies do. My dad picked me up and carried me through the hallway, walking back and forth, trying anything to settle me down. He turned off the lights, hoping the darkness would help me fall asleep again. He said it went on for a while. Then suddenly, I stopped crying. Just stopped. He looked down at me and realized I wasn't looking at him. I was staring up into one corner of the hallway ceiling. There was nothing there, just a plain corner where two walls met. My dad turned his body slightly, thinking maybe I was looking at a shadow or a crack or something catching the light, but every time he moved, my head shifted just enough to keep that corner in view. Then I smiled, and after that, I started laughing. Not a tired little baby noise either, according to him. A real laugh. Then I reached both arms up toward that empty corner, like I expected someone to take me. That was the part that scared him. My mom had her own story too. She said one morning, when I was about 3, I woke up and seemed different somehow. Not upset exactly, just very still, too serious for a child that age. She came into my room and said good morning, and I guess she noticed right away that something felt off. She asked me what was wrong, and I told her, very calmly, "It's finished now." She asked me what I meant. I looked at her and said, "I just came back from visiting heaven." That was all I would say. Now, could I have been making things up? Of course. Could it have been a dream? Absolutely. Kids say strange things all the time, and memory is such a slippery little creature. It changes shape when you try to hold it. But there are 2 things I know. The first is that my parents said it all stopped when I was around 3 or 4. No more talking about the gentleman. No more pointing at empty rooms. No more mentioning people walking through the house. My mom said it was like a door quietly closed, and I forgot it had ever been open. The second thing is that I do have a memory, or maybe it was a dream. I still don't know. It's old, whatever it is. Very old. More like fragments than a full scene. I remember people moving around the house, but not clearly. They were shadowy, like figures seen through smoke. They walked through walls and doors as though those things weren't really there. They didn't seem interested in me. They weren't frightening. They just went about their business like I was the one who didn't belong. Sometimes they were inside the house, sometimes outside, and what I remember most is that I felt used to them. A lot of them wore old-fashioned clothes. Long dresses, suits, hats. Things that didn't look like they belonged to my time. I don't remember conversations. I don't remember faces. I don't remember feeling scared. I only remember the sense of them passing through, quietly and endlessly, as if the world I lived in had another world folded right over it. I must have been about 5 years old when all of this happened. Somewhere between 4 and 6, but I know I wasn't older than that because I was still living with my father, and after I turned 6, everything in our lives started changing. This would have been around 2007, maybe 2008. Back then, we lived in a trailer park, but it didn't feel like just a bunch of trailers lined up together. It felt more like the whole family had built this little world of our own. My dad's brother lived nearby, and so did my dad's 2 younger sisters. Everybody was close enough that you could walk from one trailer to the next without thinking much of it. My uncle had 2 kids at the time. One was a newborn baby boy, and the other was my older cousin, who I'll call Kayla. She was around 12 or 13 then. She was in that phase where she wore a lot of dark clothes, listened to rock and heavy metal, and kind of carried herself like she was older than she really was. One afternoon after preschool, Kayla was babysitting me and my little sister. I remember walking into the kitchen and seeing her sitting at the table with what I thought was some kind of board game. I didn't know what it was. I just remember the board, her hands on it, and the feeling that she was taking it very seriously. A little while later, my dad and my uncle came in and saw what she was doing. Everything changed instantly. My uncle snatched the board away from her, and he and my dad started fussing at her, asking where she got it and why she was playing with something like that. They kept telling her it was dangerous. I didn't understand why everybody was so upset. To me, it still looked like a game. The only thing I clearly remember Kayla saying was, "You're supposed to say goodbye." My uncle handed the board to my dad and told him to throw it away. But my dad didn't throw it away right then. He brought it back to our trailer and kept it. After that, strange little things started happening. At first, it was small. I'd leave my toys in one spot, go watch cartoons, then come back and find them moved around like somebody had been playing with them. Sometimes I'd be lying in my room on my little blue race car bed, the kind with the plastic still on the mattress under the sheets, and I'd hear something climb off the bed and run out of the room. Then I started seeing a little boy. And the strangest part is, I wasn't scared of him. Not at first. He felt like another kid. One day after school, he came running down the hallway from my dad's bedroom toward me, and he introduced me to his sister. I remember trying to get his sister to play with my little sister, but nobody else could see them. Not my sister, not my parents. When I tried to tell them, they thought I was making it up. A little more time passed. By then, I was in kindergarten, and things at home were getting worse. My parents were arguing all the time. My mom had left the house, and my dad was drinking a lot. He was in a bad place. One weekend, my mom took my little sister with her, so it was just me and my dad at the trailer. I had been outside riding my bike around the park, and when I came back inside, I saw my dad sitting on the floor at the coffee table. He had the board. The same board from months earlier. He was asking it questions. Trailer was the whole ghost family. The little boy I had been seeing, his sister, their mother, their father. The kids just stared at me, but the parents looked angry. Not sad, not confused. Angry. I started yelling at my dad, telling him to turn around, telling him they were right there behind him. He looked back, but he didn't see anything. He was too drunk, and he just kept messing with the board. Something in me knew it was wrong. I didn't fully understand what was happening, but I knew enough to be scared. So I ran to my uncle's trailer and told him what was going on. He came back with me, and by then my dad had stopped. We all watched him take the board outside and throw it into the dumpster. I remember feeling relieved, even though I still didn't really understand what that board was or why it mattered so much. But that night, things got worse. I didn't want to sleep in my room because there was a dark shadow standing in the corner. I kept running out and telling my dad, but every time he checked, he said nothing was there. I tried to lie back down, but then I felt breathing right by my neck, close to my ear. I jumped up and ran out again. My dad had a woman over that night, and she tried to calm me down. She picked me up, carried me into my dad's room, tucked me into his bed, and closed the door while she and my dad stayed in the living room. The room was cold from the air conditioner. Moonlight was coming through the window, turning everything this pale blue color. Then the closet doors started rattling. I pulled the covers up over my face. When I peeked out, the closet doors were closed. Then I heard it again. This time when I looked, one of the doors was open. I ran out crying, telling my dad there was a monster in the room. He checked again and saw nothing. Then it happened. I was right on the edge of falling asleep when something ripped the covers off me. I opened my eyes, and it was the father. The father of the little boy I had been playing with. His face is something I still can't forget. He looked evil. Not just angry anymore. Evil. For a second, I couldn't move. It felt like my whole body froze, like I was trying to run but nothing would work. Then I screamed. I pointed down the hallway toward my dad's room, trying to tell him what I had seen. And right then, the bedroom door slammed shut by itself. The woman my dad had over said, "Nope, I gotta get out of here." My dad grabbed me, and we left that trailer that same night. We went to my grandparents' house, and they prayed over me. After that, I went to live with my mom. Years later, when I was about 9, I visited my dad again. By then, he had sold the trailer to a woman named Rosa, who was from Cuba. One day, my dad and I were walking to the store when Rosa came rushing outside. She had pictures she wanted to show us, pictures she said she was going to send back home to her family. But in every photo, you could see them. The same ghost family I had seen as a little kid. The mother and father only seemed to show up in what used to be my dad's old bedroom. My dad looked at the pictures and said, "My son told me about that." Then Rosa started telling us about the things happening to her in the trailer. She said something would pull her hair at night, and she said the little boy would tickle her feet while she was trying to sleep. That's when I knew it hadn't just been my imagination. I was a little kid, yes, but I know what I saw. It honestly looks like a black dog to me. I can't say exactly what kind, but from the shape, it reminds me of either a black lab mix, maybe with some pit bull, or possibly a shepherd mix. Whatever the breed is, though, I really do think it looks like a dog. And that makes me wonder, did anyone in your family have a pet that passed away around that time? Maybe a dog you knew, or one that belonged to a relative. Because it could be something like that. It could be the spirit of a family dog still lingering close by. I remember reading something a while back about a couple who looked into paranormal activity involving animals. They had a case connected to their cousin's old dog, and that dog had been incredibly close to a little girl in the family. Whenever she stayed over, the dog would sleep beside her. The two of them had grown up together in a way, and they were almost inseparable. At night, the girl would sometimes have terrible nightmares, and that dog would always comfort her. It would stay near her, calm her down, and help her sleep again. It was very protective of her. Later on, after the dog had to be put down because of cancer, the family started noticing strange things. The investigators said they captured images that looked just like that same dog. And what really stood out was that the dog seemed to appear whenever the girl was having night terrors, almost like it was still coming back to comfort her the way it always had when it was alive. So if you were close to a relative's dog when you were younger, or if there was a family pet that had a bond with you, maybe something similar is happening here. Maybe it isn't something dark at all. Maybe it's something familiar, something protective. At the same time, I also want to say this. I've dealt with sleep paralysis myself, especially on and off when I was in my early 30s, so I know how terrifying it can feel. I did a lot of reading about it after it happened to me, and from what I learned, doctors and sleep researchers don't usually connect it to anything demonic, even though that's what it can feel like in the moment. What seems to happen is that the brain gets caught between deep sleep and waking up. Our body is still in that sleep state where it can't move, but your mind is partly awake. Your breathing can feel shallow, your chest can feel heavy, and it can seem like something is sitting on you or pressing the air out of you. And then your brain tries to explain that fear. That's when the hallucinations can happen. People see shadow figures, strange faces, dark shapes, or things hovering over them. It can feel completely real, because in that moment, your body is panicking and your mind is still half dreaming. When it happened to me, I was dreaming that a violent spirit was trying to hurt me and my kids. In the dream, it wrapped a lamp cord around my neck and lifted me off the floor. That shock woke me up, but when I opened my eyes, I still couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I couldn't breathe right. I couldn't even get my voice out. And because I already had PTSD, that feeling sent me straight into a severe anxiety attack. I saw what looked like a dark figure leaning over me, almost like it was trying to smother me. It was one of the most frightening things I had ever experienced. Then, when I finally could move again, the scream I had been trying so hard to force out finally came out all at once. It woke up my kids and my brother, and they came running to check on me. At the time, I had no idea what had happened. I just knew I had been awake, unable to move, unable to speak, and completely terrified. It wasn't until later that day, when a friend explained sleep paralysis to me, that I finally had a name for it. After it happened a few more times, I started researching it seriously. I wanted to understand why it was happening and what my brain and body were doing. Eventually, I talked to my psychiatrist about it too, and that helped me understand that what I was experiencing had an explanation. So I guess what I'm saying is, it could be something spiritual, especially if there's a connection to a dog from your past. But it could also be sleep paralysis creating something that feels very real and very frightening. Either way, I don't think you should automatically assume it's evil. Sometimes the mind shows us fear, and sometimes, maybe, something loving stays close. When I was little, we lived in this narrow 2-story townhouse, the kind where every floorboard had its own little complaint. My bedroom was upstairs, and there was this crawl space in my room that stretched out over the stairwell. I hated it. I mean, really hated it. I never had a good reason exactly. It was just one of those places that felt like it was listening. Back then, my stepfather Martin was usually a pretty calm guy. Quiet, but kind. The sort of man who fixed things without making a big show of it. But over time, he started to change. He got more controlling, more short-tempered. He kept to himself a lot, and he spent more and more time down in the basement. And he made one rule very clear to me and my older brother Caleb. We were not allowed down there. Not for any reason. Not even for a second. My mom told us it was because Martin kept power tools in the basement, and it wasn't safe for kids. Saws, drills, sharp things, heavy things. That explanation made enough sense, so for a while we listened. But kids are kids. One afternoon, the school bus dropped us off, and when we got inside, nobody was home. No mom, no Martin, no car in the driveway. To us, that felt like the universe had just handed us a golden ticket to make a terrible decision. Caleb looked at me and said we should finally go see what was down there. Just a quick look, nothing major. I didn't want to, not really. But I was younger and I followed him everywhere. So we went into my mom and Martin's room, opened the closet, and there it was. The basement door tucked away behind hanging clothes and old shoes. We decided to leave the door open, just in case we heard the car pull in. That way we could run back upstairs fast and pretend we had been innocent little angels the whole time. I went down first, which still annoys me to think about, because I'm pretty sure Caleb was using me as a tiny human shield. At the bottom, I flipped the light switch. The lights buzzed and flickered on, and at first, it was just a basement. Gray concrete floor, chipped white paint on the walls, wooden beams overhead, a few cardboard boxes in the corner with Christmas decorations inside. There was an old workbench along one wall, covered in tools. Honestly, it was almost disappointing. I remember thinking, this is it? This is the forbidden basement? Then we stepped farther in, and that's when the circular saw on the workbench suddenly turned on. Not started slowly, not sputtered, it screamed to life, and I saw the cord. I know what I saw. It wasn't plugged into anything. At the same time, one of the Christmas ornaments rolled out of a box, crossed the floor by itself, and shattered a few feet away from us. We both panicked. Caleb turned and bolted for the stairs so fast he nearly knocked me down. He was halfway up before I even got my foot on the second step. Then the basement door slammed shut above us. We ran up the stairs together, pushing and clawing at each other, trying to get the door open. It wouldn't budge. Then the light went out, just like that. The saw stopped, and in the dark, we heard footsteps on the concrete below us. Slow ones, pacing, back and forth at the bottom of the stairs. I couldn't see anything clearly, but I swear there was something down there. Something darker than the dark around it. It stood at the bottom of the stairs, turning toward us. That's when I started screaming. Caleb started screaming too, and we grabbed onto each other so hard it hurt. We were crying, shaking, begging for someone to open the door. I have no idea how long we were trapped there, but I do remember one thing very clearly. Right before my mom opened the closet door from the other side, I saw that dark shape take one step up the stairs. My mom found us collapsed against the door, sobbing. It took her hours to calm us down. She ended up bringing us to our aunt's house for the night because neither of us would stop crying long enough to sleep. When Martin found out we had gone into the basement, he was furious at first. I thought he was just angry because we had broken the rule. But a few days later, after we came home, I heard him talking to my mom in the kitchen. His voice was low, but I heard him say, "I told you I wasn't crazy." And that's when something clicked for me. Martin hadn't been changing because he hated us. He hadn't been trying to scare us just to be cruel. He was trying to keep us away from whatever was living under that house. Hey, I want to share something that happened to me a while back when I was living in Wilmington, North Carolina with some of my old high school friends. One night, a buddy of mine, let's call him Mike, and I decided to head down to the beach just after midnight. We wanted to get away from everything and have a real heart-to-heart about life. So we got there around midnight and settled on this empty lifeguard tower. It was a Saturday, so there were still some people around, which felt normal to us. While we were chatting, I noticed a guy dressed all in black coming from near the pier, about 200 feet away. There were plenty of folks on the beach, so I didn't think much of it at first. But as time passed, people started leaving, and this figure kept edging closer. Mike noticed him too, and we both just stopped talking for a moment to watch. The man was about 5 or 6 feet tall, looked like he was maybe drunk, shuffling slowly. He wore a black t-shirt, black pants, and a black cap. What really got to me was his face, or well, the lack of one. There were no features at all, just a blank, black void where his face should have been. Earlier, we'd seen other people and could make out their faces just fine, so this was different, unsettling. The figure headed straight for our lifeguard tower, and Mike and I instantly went into fight or flight mode. We fell silent, eyes fixed on him as he shuffled right under the tower. Then, just like that, poof, he vanished. There was nowhere he could have gone without us seeing, but he was just gone. We didn't stick around after that and didn't talk much on the ride home. But honestly, that faceless black void still haunts me. Hey, I want to share this eerie story from long ago, back in the times of the Maratha Kingdom in India. So, there was this notorious gang of bandits, called the dacoits, who would rob travelers on lonely roads. The kingdom had a bounty on them because they were causing so much trouble. One night, after a big heist, This group of 5 or 6 men decided to hide out in an old abandoned house called a wada. It's a traditional Maratha house, kind of like a fortress, but this one was in the middle of the jungle, near a deserted village. The locals avoided it because of creepy tales. They said it was haunted. Perfect, right? For hiding stolen loot and spending the night. But this night was special. It was Amavasya, the new moon night, when paranormal activity is said to be strongest. And to top it off, it was pouring rain. So these guys were celebrating inside, some drinking by the light of a single oil lamp. As the night wore on, they started hearing this faint, strange sound. A woman singing a lullaby. They thought maybe it was just their minds playing tricks, maybe the rain or animals making noises. But the lullaby kept getting louder, and soon even the sober ones heard it. 2 of the bandits decided to check the house, thinking someone might be spying on them, but they found nothing. They shrugged it off and went back to arguing over who would keep what from the loot. Greed was really getting to them. Suddenly, in the middle of their fight, a baby's cry echoed from a dark room around the corner. All the men froze, weapons drawn but trembling. The leader, a tough man in his 50s, shouted angrily, demanding whoever was there to show themselves. For a moment, they felt brave because of him. 2 men cautiously stepped toward the room where the crying came from, but as soon as they moved, the baby's cry grew louder, and then a woman's voice boomed out, furious. "How dare you wake my child? Can't you see my baby is trying to sleep? Get out of my wada." That was when the bandits realized they were dealing with something far worse than any human enemy. Terrified, they scattered in all directions, running blindly in the pitch darkness. One of them died right then and there from sheer shock. They were screaming for help, calling out to Mother Kali, the goddess, but it was like karma had turned on them. Lost in the old, rusty house that suddenly felt like a maze, they barely escaped. One lucky bandit made it to a nearby village where soldiers tracking the gang caught him. Shaken and bruised, he told them everything: the singing, the crying, the angry voice. Even though it was a prime chance to catch the whole gang that night, the soldiers decided not to pursue further. Some things, they said, are better left alone. Hey, I want to share a little story about an unusual friendship I formed with a spirit named Greg. So, when I first moved into this old house, Greg and I didn't exactly hit it off. He was pretty restless. Imagine hearing stomping footsteps upstairs, drawers opening and closing on their own, and doors slamming shut. It mostly happened when I was either in my room upstairs or downstairs in the living room. At first, I thought someone had broken in, so I'd grab whatever I could, sometimes a baseball bat, sometimes a kitchen knife, and cautiously check through the house. But after this happened a few times, I slowly realized it wasn't an intruder. It was something else entirely. I've had my share of paranormal encounters before, but nothing this obvious, especially during the day. Though, to be fair, Greg did enjoy making some noise at night too. Eventually, I started getting pretty annoyed. One evening, I was watching TV downstairs when, out of nowhere, the master bedroom door slammed shut and the stomping and drawer noises began again. I'd been downstairs for hours, so I knew it wasn't a break-in. So I called out, something like, "Look, I don't mind you being here, but you seriously need to chill out. If you're cool with me, I'm cool with you." And just like that, the noises upstairs stopped. It felt like he was listening. After that, Greg mostly toned it down, though I'd still catch little signs of his presence now and then. I guess he just wanted to be acknowledged. I'm not exactly sure when I started calling him Greg, but it felt right, and somehow I think he approved. Sometimes when I'm alone in a room, I can really feel him nearby. Funny thing is, he's not a big fan of my dogs. Not that he's ever harmed them. But when Greg's around, they get super cautious, watching spots I can't quite see. When he's close, there's this weird static feeling in my vision. I eventually moved out for university, and to my surprise, Greg came along. He mostly leaves me alone now, but every so often I hear him messing around, especially with my roommate. Things get moved to totally different rooms. Appliances switch off randomly, and sometimes my roommate finds their bookmark pulled out of the book they're reading. I can't remember all the little pranks, but it's clear Greg's still around. Now, as I'm about to move again, I feel a bit sad thinking Greg might not follow me this time. It's oddly comforting knowing he's nearby. Maybe he's decided to hang out with my roommate instead. So, if you ever have a noisy, meddling spirit around, maybe they're just looking for a little company. Coexisting peacefully might just be possible. Hey, I want to share something pretty eerie that happened recently, and I hope you'll bear with me because it's a bit of a mixed experience between my husband's encounter and what I went through myself. So here's the background. We're in the middle of moving out of our home. My husband, let's call him Daniel, just got a teaching job in another part of the state. With in-person learning back on, the 3-hour drive daily wasn't going to work anymore. So we're packing up and preparing to leave. Last week, Daniel was cleaning the bathroom tiles in the shower, just scrubbing away like he usually does, and suddenly, 2 of the tiles just popped off. When he pulled them away, there was this crumbled sheetrock behind it. Honestly, this house was never really built properly. The walls are kind of a mess. A few days after that, Daniel told me something that gave me chills. He said he saw a figure in the bedroom, something he could only describe as a mix between Samara from The Ring, you know, that ghostly girl with long hair covering her face, and Cousin It from the Addams Family. So kind of this strange, eerie shape with hair all over, but standing upright. It was about chest height to him, and he's a tall guy, around 6 feet. The weird part? It just stood there in the doorway, less than 5 feet away, and then Daniel just walked straight through it, like it wasn't even there. He kept walking right past it and into the vacuum cleaner against the wall. Now, here's where my part comes in. We've been sleeping with just the covers on top lately because it's been way too hot for blankets underneath. One night, I'm not entirely sure if I was already asleep or just about to drift off, but I remember looking toward the doorway of our bedroom. And there it was, the same kind of figure Daniel saw. Same height, same eerie long hair covering the face. But this time, it did something different. It made this grabbing motion with its hand, palm turned inward, like it was reaching out to me. My heart just stopped. I was so startled that I slid under the covers and didn't dare look again for the rest of the night. This isn't the first time I've had ghostly encounters. Our dearly departed dog, Max, still feels like he's here sometimes, especially when we hear that familiar snore in the quiet moments. But this was the first time I clearly saw a human-like ghost. Not just a shadow or a trick of the mind. It felt real. I also remembered something a client of mine once told me when I worked at her house for a few weeks. She mentioned a ghost in her closet that grabs female caregivers if they don't enter carefully. Apparently, the last tenant in her home had hung himself in that closet. Creepy, right? Because ever since then, I've always made sure to knock and say out loud why I'm entering any room, just to be respectful and cautious. Back to our house. I don't know any history about it, no stories or legends that I'm aware of. Daniel thinks maybe the spirit is unhappy about us leaving. I don't want to be scared to fall asleep, but honestly, it's hard not to be. I keep wondering if there's something more going on here, or if it's just a weird coincidence. But the feeling in the room is definitely heavy, and that figure in the doorway still haunts my thoughts. I guess all I want to know is, should I be worried? Or is this just one of those things that happen when you're moving on from a place that's held so much of your life? Hey, I want to tell you about this strange experience I had while working at Carisbrooke Castle on the Isle of Wight. It was during winter, and I was part of a private security team hired for an event there. There were about 10 to 15 of us spread out across the castle grounds, which were completely dark at night. No streetlights or anything nearby, just the castle's ancient walls and the cold air. It was really late, like around 1 or 2 in the morning, and my buddy, let's call him Greg, and I got stuck with the less desirable job, the perimeter walk. This meant we had to patrol the entire castle wall, where it was pitch black except for the light from our handheld torches. On our right, there was the moat, silent and still, wrapping around the castle like a dark ribbon. As we started our second lap along the longest stretch of the wall, I suddenly heard footsteps. They were soft, but definitely not ours. Greg and I stopped a few times, shining our torches into the shadows, trying to catch whatever was making the noise. But nothing was there. Maybe just an animal, I thought, a fox or something moving quietly in the darkness. Then everything changed in just a few seconds. Out of the darkness, I spotted the figure of a man walking towards us. He was coming up from the moat side, the water's edge behind him. As he got closer, he said something to us, something like, "All right, Greeley," or maybe, "Right, Greeley." It was a casual, almost familiar greeting. But here's the part that still haunts me. Instead of walking past us or around, this man walked straight into the castle's 12-foot-tall stone wall. I mean, literally walked straight into it, like the wall wasn't there at all, and then he just vanished. He didn't go around it, didn't disappear behind a corner, just vanished into solid rock. Greg and I just stood there, frozen, trying to process what we had seen. We turned to each other, eyes wide, and confirmed we both saw the same impossible thing. Someone walked into a solid wall and disappeared. We raised the alarm immediately, thinking it was an intruder. But after a thorough search of the site, there was no sign of anyone. No footprints leading away, no shadow in the darkness. Nothing that could explain the man who had just vanished into stone. To this day, I don't know what we saw that night, but I know what I saw. And it was like something out of a ghost story, right there in the cold, silent night at Carisbrooke Castle. Hey, I want to share something that happened to me recently. Something pretty eerie, but also strangely moving. So, I'm a 23-year-old guy living in this community housing project. Imagine a place that's kind of a mix between a hotel and an apartment complex. One big building with 3 floors, each floor having about 20 little studio rooms. Then there are 2 other buildings nearby, which have 2-bedroom apartments. Just to give you a sense of the place, I've been living here for about 8 months now, and honestly, nothing much weird had happened. At least, nothing that I'd call a problem. But right across the hall from my room, there was this older woman who lived alone. From the moment I moved in, I'd hear her at night. Screaming, yelling, cursing, like full-on conversations with herself or maybe someone else. It was intense and, honestly, kind of heartbreaking. The way she shouted sometimes, it was like she was arguing with demons no one else could see. Sometimes she'd cry and then immediately apologize, like she was talking to someone she loved but couldn't reach. At first, this nightly noise was jarring, but after a while, I got used to it. It became part of the background noise of my life here. Sometimes in the hallway, I'd spot her, not literally bumping into her, but just crossing paths. No one really talked to her, probably because she was always so aggressive, pointing fingers at people and shouting the most vicious things. Our first meeting was rough. She gave me the same harsh treatment as everyone else. But I have this soft spot for old ladies, probably because I lost my grandmother back in 2014, so I smiled and asked how she was doing, just trying to be kind. She seemed taken aback, didn't yell or curse at me like she did with others. That little moment felt like a crack in the wall she'd built around herself. So, fast forward to July 1st, just a few weeks ago. Over these months, I'd probably seen her in the hall about 9 or 10 times, always brief encounters. We never really had a real conversation, but I always acknowledged her, and she started showing a little gratitude in her eyes, even if she didn't say much. But her nightly screaming was relentless. It was like she was possessed, sounding less like herself and more like an angry, middle-aged man. Picture this. It's 4:30 in the morning, dark outside, and after a 10-hour shift, you come home exhausted, only to hear this shrieking right across the hall. Then came the scary part. I was typing this story around 4:14 a.m., and everything felt surreal. On the morning of July 18th, around 6 a.m., the woman was found dead in her apartment, right across from mine. No signs of violence, no visitors, no family to speak of. A maintenance guy who checked on her daily found her and alerted everyone. They said it was either natural causes or suicide. I wasn't home when it happened because I'd been at my girlfriend's place all weekend. When I came back Sunday around noon, the building was eerily quiet. No screams, no curses. I walked down the hallway to my door, and then something unbelievable happened. I saw her. The old woman, but different. She looked cleaner, calmer, even happy. Her hair was neat, not wild and tangled. And she spoke, clearly this time. She saw me and said, "Hey." Just that simple greeting, but it hit me hard. It was like seeing a totally new person. We had a little chat. I can't remember all the details, but she seemed radiant, full of a peaceful energy I'd never seen in her before. She told me, "I'll see you again, young man," then walked back into her apartment. I was stunned. I thought maybe I was imagining things or dreaming. But then, right after, Miss Tate from the rental office knocked on my door. She's like a godmother figure to me here. She looked shaken, horrified even. She asked how I was doing, and then told me about the woman across the hall, the same screaming lady, who had taken her own life that morning. I was speechless for what felt like forever. I told Miss Tate about seeing her just minutes ago, and she was confused, even skeptical. We almost argued, but I insisted we check the apartment together. She was scared to go in, but eventually, she showed me the paperwork confirming the woman's death. Turns out, she suffered from severe schizophrenia and dementia, and the last years of her life were incredibly lonely and painful. I never even knew her name. But that day, seeing her like that, peaceful and kind, felt like she was finally free from whatever haunted her. So yeah, that's my story. It's strange, a little scary, but also strangely beautiful. That in the end, she found some peace. Thanks for listening. I was somewhere around 11 when it started, maybe a little younger. It went on for years, probably until I was about 15. And the strange thing is, it never felt random. It felt like whatever was in that house knew exactly who it wanted to bother. Mostly it seemed focused on me and my sister. I've thought about it a lot over the years, and I still don't really know what it was. Part of me wonders if it was just some harmless spirit making itself known. But another part of me remembers the feeling in that house, and honestly, it didn't feel harmless. It felt watchful, heavy, almost annoyed that we were there. There are a few things I remember clearly, even now. One night I had gone to bed around 10. I was lying there trying to sleep, and the very second I closed my eyes, there was this massive bang right beside me. I don't mean a normal bang. I mean, it sounded like something exploded next to my head. My ears were ringing. My whole body reacted before my brain even caught up. I ran upstairs crying to my parents. They had heard it too, which made it even worse somehow, because it meant I hadn't imagined it. We all went back down to my room, and right beside my bedroom door there was this cardboard moving box. It had a deep, shoe-shaped dent in it, like someone had kicked it as hard as they possibly could. There was no one there. No one could have done it and disappeared. It was only a couple of meters from where I had been lying. Another night, I was home alone at around 3 in the morning. I was upstairs watching TV, trying to act normal in a house that never really felt normal. Then I heard footsteps. They started at the bottom of the staircase. Slow, heavy, deliberate footsteps. Not creaks, not the house settling. Actual footsteps, one after another, coming up the stairs. I remember turning from the sofa and just staring at the staircase. I couldn't move. My whole body went cold, like all the blood had decided to leave at once. The steps kept coming, all the way up. The moment they reached the top, I ran. I bolted out of the house wearing just a t-shirt, and it was freezing outside, something like -3 or -4 degrees. I stood out there shaking for hours until my parents came home. That fear is hard to explain unless you felt it. It wasn't just being scared. It was like staring into something that was staring back. There was another time when my childhood friend Marcus was over. We were in my room in the middle of the day, playing video games. Broad daylight, nothing creepy about it at first. Then we both heard footsteps coming down from the second floor. They stopped right outside my bedroom door. We looked at the handle, and both of us watched it slowly turn. Then the door opened by itself. Nobody was there. That one still bothers me because someone else saw it too. It wasn't just me being tired or scared. Marcus saw the same thing happen right in front of us. My sister had her own experiences too. I didn't witness all of them myself, so I can't say with total certainty exactly what happened. But after what I went through, I believe her. She had this little toy ice cream truck that only worked if you pulled it backward first. Then it would roll forward and play music. One night around 2 in the morning, it suddenly started playing on its own. Then it drove itself right off the shelf in her room. That should not have been possible without someone pulling it back first. But the scariest thing she ever told me was about her bed. She had one of those bunk-style beds where there was a mattress above and a space below. One night she woke up for no obvious reason. She was about to go back to sleep when she saw the top mattress slowly pressing downward, like someone had climbed onto it and was lying down directly above her. She said that was the worst thing that ever happened to her in that house. After we moved out, it stopped. Completely. Neither of us has had anything like that happen since. There were other things too, smaller things. Knocks, random sounds, little moments that would probably scare most people, but after a while, you almost go numb to them. The big things stay with you. The rest just becomes part of the background noise of living in a place that doesn't feel like it wants you there. I still wonder what it was. An angry man, a jealous child, something attached to the house, or something else entirely. I don't know, but I know what it felt like. It felt like something was waiting for us to be alone. I've never thought of myself as a skeptic, but I wouldn't say I'm completely convinced either. I'm somewhere in the middle, I suppose. I'm definitely not the kind of person who would dismiss what someone else has seen, felt, or believed. I do believe that places can hold on to something. A house, a stretch of bushland, a beach even. I think the energy of someone who spent time there can linger after they're gone, especially if they were close to you, or if that place carries some deeper cultural history. It feels to me like those energies can overlap with the shared consciousness we all move through in our own separate ways. But I don't really believe in seeing ghosts, not in the simple sense. I don't think spirits just appear in front of us like figures in a doorway. I think maybe that energy touches the brain somehow, and for some people, it's too strange or too big to understand as it is. So the mind gives it a shape. It creates an image we can process. And saying all that, I have this memory. It's one I come back to every now and then, usually out of nowhere. I thought about it again tonight. It doesn't frighten me. It never really has. It's just one of those memories I keep tucked away, something quiet that I sit with. I was about 11, maybe 12. We were camping near the beach, just me, one of my parents, and a family friend. It was early morning, right before sunrise, and I'd gone out for a surf. The sun hadn't quite broken over the horizon yet. The water was almost unnaturally smooth, like glass stretched out forever. The waves were coming in clean, perfect little sets, probably 4 or 5 feet high. They were so even they almost didn't look real. I was paddling out. The first few waves broke right over me, so I duck-dived under them one after another. Then I finally got far enough out that I could paddle over the swell just before it broke. And as I came up over one wave, right at the crest, I saw someone. A surfer. They were paddling over the next wave ahead of me, just off to my left, around 11 o'clock. They were facing slightly to the right. I saw them clearly, but only for a second. It was almost like a shadow had taken the shape of a surfer. Their right foot was bent upward, and their left foot was flat, like they were steadying themselves on the board. Then the swell rose between us. I paddled over it, expecting to see them on the other side. But there was nobody there. No surfer, no board, nothing. There wasn't anyone else out there with me, just the water, the waves, and that pale edge of sunrise beginning to open up across the horizon. I remember squinting toward the light as the sun came up, just trying to understand what I'd seen. I looked around for a while, but there was nothing to find. Eventually, I just kept surfing. That was the strange part, really. I didn't panic. I didn't feel some huge, dramatic rush of fear or awe. It was quieter than that. The feeling was almost underwhelming, like watching a meteor come blazing through space, something ancient and impossible, lighting up the sky as it hits our atmosphere. And then, after all that fire, it becomes a tiny stone, something small enough to put in your pocket. That's how the memory feels to me. I still don't know what to think about that morning. Part of me feels like that little meteor burned a hole through my pocket and slipped down through my jeans into my shoe. And now it's just sitting there. I can't get it out. But it's small enough that I can wedge it between my toes and keep walking. Most of the time, I can ignore it. Until I remember it again. Until I get tired of holding it in place. This happened about 5 years ago, but I still think about it sometimes, and every time I do, I get that same cold feeling through my whole body. My dad passed away more than 9 years ago. We were never extremely close, mostly because my parents separated when I was little, but he was still around. We saw each other, spent time together, and even with everything that had happened in our family, he was still part of my life. When he died, I was upset, of course. But I didn't break down the way people might expect. I didn't fall into some deep grief. It hurt, but it didn't consume me. And for years after that, life just kept moving. Then, several years after his death, when everyone in the family seemed to have found some kind of peace, especially my grandparents on his side, I had a dream that changed the way I think about all of it. At the time, I was working a night shift. On quiet nights, if there was nothing urgent going on, we were allowed to sleep for a couple of hours. So I lay down and drifted off. In the dream, I was at my grandparents' house, on my father's side. I remember it felt like I had just woken up there in the morning, but something was wrong right away. The house was too quiet. The street outside was too quiet. Usually, you could hear cars passing, birds, little sounds of the day starting. But there was nothing, just this heavy silence. I walked out into the hallway, and there he was, my dad. He was standing there packing a travel bag, putting things inside like he was getting ready to leave for a train or a long trip. I remember feeling surprised, but not scared at first. I just asked him something like, "Where are you going this early?" He didn't answer. Then I noticed other people standing nearby. My mom was there, my grandparents were there, my sister was there too. But they were all young, maybe 18 or 20 years old. And somehow, even that didn't make me realize I was dreaming. It all felt completely normal, completely real. They just stood there quietly, watching us. My dad kept packing. And then, all at once, it hit me. He was dead. He couldn't be there. He couldn't be standing in that hallway with me. The second I understood that, he finished packing, picked up the bag, and walked toward the front door. He opened it and started to leave. I panicked. I grabbed his hand and said, "Don't go. Stay here. You don't have to leave." He tried to pull his hand away, but he still didn't say anything. So I said, "Then let me go with you." That was when he finally looked at me. His face was calm. His voice was calm too, and he said, "It's too early for you to go there. Everything is all right." And then I let go. But it didn't feel like I chose to let go. It felt like someone gently opened my fingers for me. He walked out the door. Right after that, I woke up at work. For about 10 minutes, I couldn't tell if I was actually awake or if I had only woken up inside another dream. Everything felt strange, like the real world had become thin around the edges. Later, I called my grandmother, my dad's mother, and told her what had happened. She wasn't scared. She actually sounded comforted. She said she was glad he had visited me. Since then, I've never been able to explain it completely. Maybe it was my mind finally processing grief I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Maybe it was my subconscious trying to help me accept something I had buried. Or maybe there really is something after this life. Some place people go. Some doorway we don't understand yet. What makes it even stranger is that I almost never dream. I can count the dreams I've had in the last few years on one hand. And I have never had another dream like that one. Nothing before it, and nothing since, has ever felt so real. My dad passed away in 2019 when I was 26. It was sudden and awful, the kind of loss that splits your life into before and after. I loved him so much, and I've always wanted to keep his memory close. But honestly, some days it still hurts too much to touch. My little girl was born in May of 2023. That first Christmas after she arrived, my brother's wife gave me a gift that absolutely undid me. It was a photo she had made, with my dad gently added into the picture beside my husband, me, my daughter, my mom, and my sister. And if you've ever lost a parent before they got to meet your child, you probably know exactly what happened. I opened it, saw him there with all of us, and just broke. Full, ugly, breath-catching tears. Since my daughter was a baby, I've always played white noise while she sleeps. She's in her own room, in her crib, and we use the monitor every night. And I know how this sounds, but both my husband and I swear we've heard my dad's voice through it. Not long conversations, nothing dramatic, just little things. A soft hello. Once, something that sounded so much like "all my heart." And that was his phrase. Every night when I was little, he would say, "Sweet dreams, baby girl. I love you with all my heart." Before our daughter was born, my husband asked me what I'd want her to call my dad. I said, "Papa." That's what I called my favorite grandparent growing up, and somehow, I felt like that's exactly what my dad would have wanted too. When my baby was around 9 months old, I showed her the photo my sister-in-law had made. The second she saw it, her whole face lit up. I mean, the biggest smile. She pointed straight at him and said, "Papa, that's Papa." Now, maybe my grown-up heart filled in a little of what she was trying to say, but Papa was clear, crystal clear. And the thing is, I hadn't really shown her pictures of him before that. I meant to. I truly did. But that first year of motherhood was tender and heavy. I had this beautiful baby, and at the same time, I was grieving the fact that my dad would never hold her. Add postpartum hormones, exhaustion, and all the changes that come with becoming a mother, and I just couldn't look at his photos very often. So when she saw him and seemed to know him anyway, it felt like something opened in my chest. She's 3 now. A little while ago, we were drawing together, and she asked me to draw our family. I asked her who she wanted me to include. She said, "My papa. He has blue eyes, just like mine." And they do. They have the exact same shade of blue eyes. By then, I had shown her a few pictures of him, but they were mostly from far away. Not close enough for her to really notice his eye color. I know not everyone believes in things like this, and that's okay. But I really do believe children can sense more than we can. Their minds are so new. They haven't built all the walls we adults carry around. So I like to believe my daughter and my dad know each other somehow. Maybe not in the way I wish they could have, not in the way where he could scoop her up and make her laugh, but in some quiet, beautiful way. And that thought fills my heart so completely, I don't even know what to do with it. I want to start by saying I've never really been the superstitious type. I'm not someone who jumps straight to ghosts or paranormal explanations. Honestly, I used to be the kind of person who would test those stories just to prove they weren't real. There was this old place near where I grew up called Ashwood Manor. People said if you took a brick from the ruins, strange things would start happening to you. So, naturally, when I was in high school, I took one. Not because I believed it, but because I wanted to show everybody it was nonsense. Nothing happened. At least, not then. Years before things got really strange, around 2006, I had just gotten one of those little flip phones with a camera on it. And you know how it was back then. If your phone had a camera, suddenly everything in the world deserved a picture. One evening, my mom and I were driving home when we got stopped at an old railroad crossing in my hometown. The tracks were historic, and trains almost never came through anymore, so when one did, it felt unusual. It was still light out, clear and sunny, and while we sat there waiting, I decided to take a picture of the train passing by through the car window. After I took it, I looked down at the screen. In the glare of the window, there was a man. Not a reflection of someone outside, not my mom, not me. Just this clear shape of a man's head and shoulders. He looked like he was wearing a long coat and one of those old-fashioned fedora-style hats. I showed my mom right away, and she went quiet. She saw it too. There were only 2 of us in the car, and neither of us could explain it. When we got home, we started looking online for anything connected to that railroad. Accidents, deaths, old stories, anything. We couldn't find much. My mom was so unsettled by it that she even sent the photo to the local paper, hoping someone might recognize something about it. Nothing ever came of it, so eventually we just sort of filed it away under one of those things you can't explain. We didn't talk about it much, but we both remembered it. Then, in the middle of 2020, a few months into the pandemic, I moved out on my own. I had my closest friend and partner living with me, and that was the start of a really hard stretch of life. There was drinking, chaos, abuse, and a lot of nights where I didn't feel safe, even in my own home. Around that same time, I started having panic attacks in my sleep. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, gasping for air, heart racing, mind spinning so fast I couldn't catch up to it. It was awful. My bedroom had a walk-in closet with sliding doors. If you stepped out of the closet, my bed was directly in front of it, turned sideways against the wall. I usually slept on the side closest to the closet. One night, after a long, exhausting day, I fell asleep with the closet door open and the light still on. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up in a panic. But the second I opened my eyes, I saw him. A dark figure was standing right over me, looking down at me. He didn't have a face, but I knew him immediately. The coat, the hat. It was the same figure from that picture years anymore. And the strangest part is, I wasn't terrified. I know I should have been. Anyone would be. But the fear drained out of me almost instantly. The panic stopped. My breathing slowed. I felt calm in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. It was almost like he was saying, "You're okay. Go back to sleep." And I did. I fell right back asleep and slept peacefully through the rest of the night. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I told my mom and I told a couple of friends. I'm pretty sure everyone except my mom thought I was losing it. But my mom remembered the photo. She knew this wasn't just something I made up out of nowhere. For the rest of that day, I kept turning it over in my mind. What bothered me most wasn't that I had seen him. It was that he made me feel safe. My mom used to tell my sister and me that everyone had a guardian angel. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe that was what he was. Maybe he had been there all along, quietly watching over me in some strange way I didn't understand. A few weeks later, I was listening to "Devil Like Me" by Rainbow Kitten Surprise, and when I saw the music video, I froze. It was in black and white, and it followed this tall man in a long coat and a hat. There he was again. I know it was just a person in a music video, obviously, but it looked so close to what I had seen that it sent a chill through me. After that, I started searching online for stories about figures like him. That's when I realized other people had seen something similar too. A dark figure, a coat, a hat, the Hat Man. That was honestly the part that shook me the most, because I still don't consider myself someone who believes in ghosts or paranormal things. But I know what I saw, and even now, as strange as it sounds, I still like to think he wasn't there to hurt me. Maybe he was there to protect me. I want to tell you about something that happened to me when I was younger, because even now, years later, I still don't really know what to make of it. There were chapters of my life when I used cannabis from time to time. I had always heard that different cultures all over the world had used it in spiritual rituals or as a way to reach some kind of awakening. I knew that in my head, but I never truly understood it. Not until one particular afternoon. I was in my early 20s then, maybe 24 or 25. I hadn't smoked in a couple of years, but for whatever reason, I decided to try it again. Nothing dramatic, nothing reckless, just a small amount. At the time, I had this little workshop behind my house. It was quiet, a bit dusty, full of old tools and things I kept meaning to fix. I went out there alone, sat down, and smoked by myself. At first, everything felt normal. Then the air started to change. It was subtle in the beginning, almost like the light had softened. Then this golden shimmer spread across everything, like the whole room had been covered in a thin layer of liquid sunlight. It looked almost unreal, but not frightening. More like the world had slipped on a secret skin. And then I started seeing memories. Not just thinking about them, seeing them. People I had known, friends who had spent time with me in that workshop, moments I hadn't thought about in years, they began appearing around me. They were laughing, talking, moving silently, like scenes from an old home movie. One moment would dissolve, and another would take its place. Everything had that same warm, golden glow around it. I remember sitting there, watching these pieces of my life play out all around me, and for a little while I was just stunned. It felt beautiful, but it also started to become too much. So I told myself, okay, I need to go inside. I'll take a shower, calm down, and let this pass. But when I stood up, the people from those memories stood up too. That is the part that still makes my stomach tighten when I think about it. They didn't stay behind like images fading on a wall. They rose with me, turned with me, and followed me as I walked out of the workshop and toward the house. In that moment, they didn't feel like memories anymore. They felt present. A quiet little crowd from my own past, walking beside me. I went straight to the bathroom. I didn't want to look too closely at anything. I just wanted water, light, something ordinary. I stepped into the tub, turned on the shower, and the second the water touched my skin, the whole room vanished. There were no walls, no ceiling, no mirror, no house. Just white light. It was everywhere, bright, endless, and alive, like I had stepped into the heart of a star. I remember looking around, trying to understand where I was, and then I heard a voice. It was enormous, not loud in the usual way, but vast. It filled everything. It didn't sound human exactly, but it didn't feel cruel either. Somehow it felt familiar, serious, ancient, and strangely comforting. And it said, "I am the rider of the white horse, and when the hour arrives, you are to be my vessel." The last word echoed, and then it was over. Just like that, I was standing in my shower again. The water was running over me. The bathroom looked completely normal. The light was ordinary. The air was still. There was no golden shimmer, no people, no white void, no voice. Everything had snapped back into place in a single breath. That might be the strangest part of all for me. If this had only been the cannabis affecting my mind, I would have expected it to come on gradually and fade gradually. But it didn't. It ended like someone had switched off a lamp. I had never hallucinated before that day, and I haven't hallucinated since. I know what some people will hear in this. The rider of the white horse. The connection to the book of Revelation. I'm aware of it. But that only makes it more confusing for me, because I have never considered myself religious. I wasn't raised to obsess over biblical prophecy, and I definitely wasn't sitting there thinking about Revelation in a backyard workshop. So I still wonder about it. Why would my mind create something so specific from a belief system I didn't really follow? Was it just a strange chemical storm in my brain? Was it some buried symbol I had absorbed without realizing it? Or was something actually there with me that day? I don't have an answer. I only know what I experienced, and whatever it was, it has never really left me. I never really believed in the paranormal. I mean, I've heard stories. I've listened to people talk about things they couldn't explain, but I always thought there had to be some normal reason behind it. A sound outside, a half-asleep mind, Bad timing. But now, after what's happened twice, exactly 1 year apart, on the same date, I'm honestly starting to wonder. I moved into this little bungalow about 2 years ago. Nothing about it seemed strange at first. It was quiet, a bit tucked away. The kind of place where you notice every creak and every gust of wind because there isn't much else going on. The first time it happened was April 12th, 2025. I had fallen asleep in my room with the back door open. I know, not the smartest thing, but it was one of those mild nights, and I didn't think much of it. At some point, I suddenly woke up. Not because of a noise, at least not at first. I just woke up with this horrible, tight feeling in my chest, like my body knew something was wrong before my brain did. I sat up, trying to get my bearings. Then I heard it. A scream. Not a fox scream. Not a person messing around. This was a proper, blood-freezing scream, and it sounded close enough that every part of me went still. I grabbed something to protect myself and just sat there, listening. Then it happened again. Closer. After that, silence. I waited, barely breathing, and then I heard it a third time. This time, it sounded like it came from my garden. I jumped up, slammed the back door shut, locked it, and just stood there with my heart going mad in my chest. Then the scream came again, but farther away this time. I remember thinking, what on earth was that? And then, as if that wasn't enough, every fire alarm in the house suddenly went off at once. There was no smoke, no fire, nothing burning, nothing that could have set them off. They'd never done anything like that before, and they haven't randomly done it since, except for what happened the next year. I turned them off, checked the whole place, and found nothing. That was it for that night. And honestly, after a while, I pushed it out of my mind. Then April 12th, 2026 happened. This was very recent, and the strange part is, I had completely forgotten about the year before, until after everything happened again. That night, I was in my room, but I wasn't asleep. There had been a few burglaries nearby, so I'd been extra careful. I checked all the doors. I made sure the windows were closed. I locked everything. There was no way anyone should have been able to get inside. For a bit of context, there's a stray cat I feed. I call her Millie. She started staying in the house most nights, but I'm certain she wasn't inside at that point. I would have noticed her. Then, out of nowhere, I heard my front door open. I know what my front door sounds like. I know the lock. I know the little shift of the handle and the way it creaks. So I grabbed something again and went to check. And there, sitting in the front room, was Millie. Just sitting there. The front door was closed, and when I checked it, it was locked. I can't explain that. I know I locked it earlier. I know she wasn't in the house, but somehow she was inside. The worst part was the way she looked. She was terrified, completely frozen, staring out the window like something was standing outside. She would not look away. I tried calling her, but she just kept staring. Then the fire alarm went off again, just like the year before. No smoke, no fire, nothing. I turned it off, checked the house, checked the doors again, and everything was locked. And that was the second encounter. I don't know what to make of it. I still don't want to jump straight to ghosts or anything like that. But two strange things happening on the exact same date, 1 year apart, in the same house, with the fire alarms going off both times? That feels harder to ignore. So if anyone knows more about this kind of thing, hauntings, spirits, dates repeating, whatever it might be, I genuinely appreciate hearing your thoughts. Because right now, I'm left wondering what on earth happens here every April 12th. I was only 3 years old the first time it happened. It was a bright, moon-washed night in the middle of summer, and I remember seeing my uncle standing near the upstairs balcony, talking to me as if everything was normal. It felt real, not dreamlike, not blurry, real. The next morning, I told my mother about it. That was when we found out he had passed away around that same time the night before. I was too little to understand what that meant back then, but somehow, that memory stayed with me. It never faded the way childhood memories usually do. As I got older, something else started happening. I began having a very specific kind of nightmare. The strange thing is, it is not always clear or visual. Sometimes I do not see a face. Sometimes I wake up and the details disappear almost instantly. But the feeling is always there. It feels like death. Not just fear, not just sadness. It is this heavy, bitter, awful feeling, like someone close to me has died, and when I wake up, I feel completely shaken. Even when nothing happens afterward, the fear stays in my body for days, sometimes even weeks. There have been false alarms, I know that. But between the time I was about 11 and my late 20s, there were several times when I had that exact kind of dream, and then, within a few days, I heard that someone had died. When I was a teenager, I had the dream once, and the very next day one of our neighbors passed away. I tried to push it out of my mind after that. I told myself it was nothing, just a coincidence, just a bad dream. Then, when I was 16, it happened again. I had the same kind of dream, and for the next few days, I was tense and alert, waiting for bad news. But nothing happened. So I started to relax. About 2 months later, I had the dream again. I know it was the same one because I wrote it down in my diary at the time. My grandfather died within 2 days. That one broke something in me. Logically, I know I did not cause it. I know that. But emotionally, I felt responsible somehow, like I had been warned and had done nothing. I stopped eating properly. I stopped going out. I barely spoke to anyone. I was just stuck in shock. There were other incidents over the years, but later in life, something happened that disturbed me even more. I have some aunts on one side of the family whom I mostly knew when I was younger. After that, I spent a lot of time away in hostels, and we lived far from them, so contact became limited to the occasional phone call. At some point, I realized I could not even clearly remember all their faces anymore. Then one night, I had that nightmare again. This time, I clearly remembered that it involved a woman dying. I woke up in extreme distress beside my boyfriend, and he could see how shaken I was. I told him, "It feels like someone has died." He held me and tried to comfort me. He said it was probably just a nightmare. 2 days later, we got the news that one of my aunts had died. I completely fell apart. My sleep became disturbed again. My mother was crying. All the guilt came rushing back, that horrible feeling that somehow I had known before it happened. I was so upset that I could not even bring myself to call their family and offer comfort. Then, within a month, I had the same dream again. This time, I remembered the woman's face clearly. It looked exactly like the aunt who had died the month before. So I told myself it must be grief. It had to be anxiety. Maybe my mind was replaying her image because she had already passed. But then another aunt suddenly had a stroke and was hospitalized because of a brain aneurysm. She went into a coma. While I was talking to my mother and trying to comfort her, I found out something I had not fully understood before. This aunt was the twin sister of the aunt who had died the month before from cardiac arrest. That detail made everything feel unreal, like the floor had tilted beneath me. Even recently, I had another nightmare where I was in a hospital and there were too many relatives gathered there. The next morning, I woke up to the news that my boyfriend's father had suffered a heart attack. Thankfully, he is okay now, but the fear came back immediately. What makes this so hard is that I am not someone who naturally reaches for supernatural explanations. I have a science degree. I work in a scientific field. My mind always tries to find patterns, causes, explanations, something rational to hold on to. But with this, I honestly do not know what to do anymore. Sometimes I feel like I am losing my grip. I have never felt comfortable telling people about this because I know how it sounds. Some people would laugh. Some would dismiss it. Some would say I am connecting unrelated events because I am scared. And maybe I am. I really do not know. But this has happened enough times, over enough years, that it has left me deeply frightened. The worst part is, I do not want this. I do not want to know beforehand if someone is going to die. I do not want to know if something bad is coming. I do not want to wake up with that feeling in my chest. I do not want to spend days terrified every time one of these dreams happens. I just want it to stop. So I am asking honestly, has anyone else ever had dreams, visions, or a strong sense of death before finding out that someone really had died? Especially more than once over many years. And if you have, how did you make sense of it? I want to tell you about something that happened when I was in college, because even now, when I think about it, I get this cold, crawling feeling. My boyfriend at the time, Carter, had a grandfather who died by suicide. Before he passed, he left a note addressed to his children. In it, he said that his wife, Carter's grandmother, was the reason he had done it. He also wrote that his kids could do whatever they wanted with the house, as long as she had nothing to do with it. He made it very clear that he did not want her living there. After that, the grandmother moved out pretty quickly, and eventually Carter's family moved into the house. Carter and I were both students then, so during summer and winter breaks, we would stay there with his parents. For a long time, nothing strange happened. The house felt normal. Heavy, maybe, because of what had happened there, but not haunted or anything like that. Then one summer, Carter's grandmother had to stay at the house for a couple of weeks. That was when everything changed. Every morning she would come downstairs exhausted and say she hadn't slept because someone had been standing in her doorway. Other nights, she said the lights kept turning on by themselves and staying on until she got up to turn them off. I'm ashamed to admit this now, but at first, I didn't really believe her. Carter and I thought maybe she was being dramatic, or maybe guilt was messing with her head. We even laughed about it a little, in that uncomfortable way people do when they don't know what else to say. And then one night, it happened to me. Carter and I were sleeping in a little guest cabin behind the house, maybe 30 feet away. It didn't have a bathroom, so if we needed to go, we had to walk back into the main house. Sometime around 1:30 in the morning, I woke up and went inside to use the bathroom. The moment I stepped in, I froze. Every light downstairs was on. Not one lamp, not a hallway light. All of them. The kitchen, the living room, the entryway, the little side room near the stairs. Everything was glowing like somebody had flipped the whole house awake. The only person sleeping downstairs was Carter's grandmother, and as far as I knew, she was asleep. I tried to tell myself there had to be a normal explanation. Maybe Carter had gone in earlier and left them on by accident. So while I was in the bathroom, I texted him, "Did you leave all the lights on downstairs?" Then I came out, and every single light was off. I can't properly describe what that felt like. It was as if the house had blinked. One second, it was lit from end to end, and the next, it was pitch black and waiting. I hadn't heard footsteps. I hadn't heard switches clicking. I hadn't heard a door, a floorboard, anything. And in that house, you would hear someone moving around at night. You absolutely would. I ran. I don't think I have ever moved that fast in my life. I flew out of that house and back to the cabin, shaking so badly I could barely get the words out. I asked Carter two things. First, "Did you leave all the lights on downstairs?" He said no. Then I asked, "Did you go in and turn them off?" He said no again. That was the moment my stomach just dropped. The next morning, I asked his grandmother if she had turned the lights on around 1:30. She said no. I asked if she had turned them off. Again, no. Carter's mom and stepdad said they had been asleep the entire time. After that, I couldn't laugh at the grandmother's stories anymore. While she stayed there, things kept happening, mostly at night. She said she saw a man standing in her doorway more than once. She said lights would turn on and stay on until she got out of bed to shut them off herself. And honestly, I believe her now. Carter's mom and I eventually started calling them his grandfather's little jokes, even though there was nothing funny about standing in that dark hallway after all the lights had gone out. His grandmother didn't even stay the full amount of time. She left early because she couldn't handle it anymore. I'm not saying I know for sure what happened. Part of me would still love a logical explanation, especially for how all those lights could turn on and then turn off again when they were in different rooms throughout the house. But whenever I start doubting whether anything exists after death, I think about that house. I think about Carter's grandfather. I think about those lights. And I remember exactly how it felt to run through the dark, knowing I had just walked into something I was never supposed to understand. I'm 19 now, but this happened when I was a kid, maybe around 8 or 9. Back then, I had a really short temper. I mean, I could get angry so fast, and for years I never understood why. Looking back now, part of me honestly wonders if it had something to do with the room I slept in, because after I moved out of that room, I rarely felt that kind of rage again. One day, I got into a really bad argument with my parents. I don't even remember what it was about anymore, but I remember running into my room, throwing myself onto my bed, and just sobbing. I was angry and hurt and overwhelmed, and I remember saying something like, "I wish I wasn't here right now." Then this strange thought came into my head. I don't know where it came from, but I said out loud that I'd give away part of my soul, only if I could still have control whenever I wanted it. I know that sounds ridiculous now. I was a child, and I'd already seen too much weird stuff online. But the moment I said it, everything inside me went quiet. The anger disappeared. The crying stopped. It was like someone had turned the volume down on the whole room. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling this strange, heavy calm. Then something made me look toward my closet. The door was open, and inside I saw two deep red eyes staring right at me. The second I saw them, my vision started going dark around the edges, slowly closing in from the sides. My whole body filled with this awful feeling, like dread had stepped into the room and was standing over me. My heart was pounding so loudly that I could hear it in my ears, but I couldn't move. Then, out of nowhere, this crushing tiredness hit me. I hadn't been tired before, not at all. But suddenly, it felt like my body was shutting down. I lay back, and it was like I was slipping away. I don't remember everything clearly after that, but I do remember fighting for whatever little control I still felt I had. I started saying the Our Father prayer as fast as I could. And as soon as I began reciting it, I felt something lift. Not all at once, slowly, like a weight was being pulled off my chest. So I kept saying it, over and over again, until that dark, heavy feeling faded, and I finally fell asleep. When I woke up, the room felt different. Not exactly bad, just strange, unreal. like waking up from a long nap in the middle of the day, when the light feels wrong and everything around you seems a little disconnected. Not long after that, my older brother Mason moved out of his room, and I took it almost immediately. My old room stayed empty for a while until my grandmother moved in. As far as I know, she never experienced anything in there, but she's very religious in her own way. She keeps crosses around the room, has a picture of Jesus, and always has a Virgin Mary candle on her desk. So maybe that made a difference. I don't know. I've never experienced anything like that again, but I do still feel like I'm sensitive to certain things. And I do believe there's something in our house. It isn't like what I saw that night, though. This one is more like a shadow figure. Everyone in the house has seen it at some point, but none of us really talk about it much. Things get knocked over sometimes, or we hear little noises when nobody's there, but it doesn't bother us or the animals, so we just leave it alone. I also remember something else now. When I was younger and had friends sleep over in that room, more than one of them told me they saw something standing in the corner. At the time, I thought they were just trying to scare me, so I ignored it. But that was before the night with the red eyes. So now when I think back on it, I'm not so sure they were joking. I don't usually talk about this, honestly. I try not to go back there in my mind. I'm a little superstitious, and I do believe in spiritual things, even though I don't really go to church. But every time I tell this story, my body reacts before I can stop it. I get goosebumps. My throat tightens. My eyes start watering. Even now, just thinking about it, I feel that old fear creeping up again. This happened when I was about 10 years old. I'm 32 now, and it still stays with me. My family had just bought a new house in North Las Vegas. It was in a new neighborhood, so new that there were barely any houses around us yet. There was a gas station down the road. My school was maybe 10 minutes away, and everything else was just open desert and dirt. At first, the house looked perfect. Big, clean, bright. The kind of place where a family should feel safe. But from the very beginning, something felt wrong. My parents had also just bought a brand new silver sedan from the dealership. I remember the first day we went to check the house. We walked through it, made sure everything looked fine, and when it was time to leave, the car would not start. A new car, fresh from the lot. My dad took it back to the dealership, and of course, they couldn't find anything wrong with it. At the time, nobody thought much of it. But looking back, I feel like that was the first warning. Once we moved in, things started slowly. I would feel watched. Not in the way where you think someone might be standing nearby. This was heavier than that. It felt hateful, like something was behind me, staring with anger. And I know people say ghost, but that never felt right to me. It didn't feel like a ghost. It felt darker. One day, we came home from the store and every window in the house was open. Every single one. Nothing was missing. Nothing looked broken. Just all the windows wide open, like someone had walked through and done it on purpose. My mom changed in that house too. She was always gentle and loving, but while we lived there, she became quiet and distant. She would lock herself in her bedroom for hours. She just wasn't herself. My parents worked late a lot, so sometimes I was home alone, or I would stay with a neighbor friend until they came back. One evening, I was by myself in the back living room, the one connected to the kitchen and near the backyard. I was watching TV, trying to relax. Then I heard the upstairs toilet flush. I froze. I knew nobody else was home. I grabbed a blanket and hid underneath it on the couch. Then I heard the bathroom cabinet shut. It had one of those doors that slammed loudly if you let it go, and that sound came from upstairs clear as anything. I stayed under the blanket until I guess I fell asleep. The next thing I remember is my parents waking me up. And the strange thing is, we still had happy moments there. We had pool parties. Friends came over. The neighborhood kids would play outside. From the outside, it probably looked like a wonderful childhood house. But deep down, I hated being there. The fear got worse after my grandfather passed away. After his funeral, my dad brought home the cross that had been resting on his coffin. He wanted it as a keepsake, something to remember him by. But after that, the house felt even heavier. One day, my dad tried to bless the house with holy water. We had a cat named Brandy. She was my best friend. I loved her so much. While my dad was sprinkling holy water near the front door, Brandy suddenly turned toward the wall and started hissing. There was nothing there. She just stood there, staring at the wall, hissing for minutes. I looked at my dad, and the hair on his arms was standing straight up. Mine was too. Then there was the thing I saw in the window. I was outside playing with my friends near sunset. We lived at the end of a cul-de-sac, and above the garage was my parents' bedroom. It had one window facing the street. I looked up at that window and saw a black figure standing there. It had white hair. I looked away, then looked back almost immediately, and it was gone. But the curtains were moving lightly, like a small breeze had passed through them. Nobody was supposed to be in that room. I told my grandmother about it later. She was very religious, and she told me that sometimes evil shows itself that way. I don't know what to think about that now. Sometimes I wonder if something was wrong with the land itself. Maybe something happened there before the houses were built. I don't know. The last thing I'll mention is when I got sick. I was a skinny but healthy kid, and suddenly I became extremely ill. I looked pale and weak, almost like I was wasting away. My parents took me to doctors, but they couldn't figure out what was wrong. When I came home, Brandy would not leave my side. She followed me everywhere, even to the bathroom. She stayed close like she was protecting me. Eventually, I got better, but my family didn't. My parents became unhappy with each other. The house felt like it had drained all the warmth out of us. We sold it, and after that, my parents went their separate ways. Years later, I talked to my mom about it. She told me she felt the same darkness in that house. She said she would never go back either. Even after we moved, I had nightmares about being there again. I would dream I was trapped inside that house, walking through those rooms, feeling that same awful presence behind me. And even now, all these years later, when I talk about it, my eyes still water. My body still remembers. Late one night, close to midnight, my friend Micah and I were driving through this heavily wooded mountain area. We weren't going anywhere specific. We were just wandering, looking for unfamiliar back roads, the kind that feel a little hidden from the rest of the world. Eventually, we found one that looked perfect. Thick trees pressing in on both sides, no painted center line, no houses nearby, just this narrow road climbing up into the dark. We'd been on it for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and I remember clearly that we were going uphill because Micah kept shifting gears to keep the car from struggling. Then, out of nowhere, I started to feel strange. Not scared exactly, not at first, just uneasy, like the air inside the car had changed. I told Micah, and we both laughed because it sounded ridiculous. We made some joke about the road being cursed or haunted, just trying to shake it off. Then our headlights caught a bright yellow sign. It said, 1,000 feet, road ends. That made the feeling worse. I told him, a little more seriously this time, that something didn't feel right. He admitted he felt it too, but again, we tried to joke about it. Something like, well, Whatever lives at the end of the road better not charge admission. Then we passed another sign. 500 feet, road ends. By then, I wasn't laughing anymore. I told Micah, as soon as we reach the end, turn around, immediately. And when we got there, everything in me wanted to leave. The road ended in gravel. There were wooden barriers across the end, and a sign that simply said, "End of road." Beyond that were trees. Off to one side, there was this little cluster of buildings. Micah turned the car around, and because I was in the passenger seat, I ended up facing the trees while the headlights swept across them. I don't know how to explain this in a way that sounds normal, because it didn't look normal. The ground beyond the road was completely flat, not gently sloped, not bumpy, not natural mountain terrain, just flat. There was no brush, no grass, no fallen branches around the trunks. Nothing. The trees themselves were thin, pale, and all spaced apart at the exact same distance, like someone had measured them with a ruler. When the headlights moved through them, it looked wrong. That's the only word I have. Wrong. My stomach dropped. My whole body felt heavy, like my bones had filled with wet cement. I told Micah to go. I didn't care how, I just wanted out. At the same time, he had seen the buildings on the other side. Later, he told me they gave him the same sick feeling. He said they looked like they weren't supposed to be there. There was one larger, red wooden building in front and two smaller ones behind it, almost like a little compound. There were no parking signs everywhere, way more than made sense. He said when the headlights hit the buildings, they looked just as wrong as the trees did to me. He didn't need convincing. He sped up the turn, and we drove out of there fast. After a while, once we had both calmed down, we decided not to go home yet. I know that sounds foolish, but we told ourselves we'd just gotten creeped out by a weird, dead-end road in the mountains. So we went a different direction, put on music, and tried to reset the mood. Eventually, we ended up on another road neither of us recognized. This one was sloping downward. After a few minutes, that feeling came back. I told Micah, "I feel like we're on that same road again." He immediately said that wasn't possible. And honestly, he had reasons. This road was going downhill, not uphill. There were warning signs for curves and a 20 miles per hour speed limit. We passed a small parking area with a blue pickup truck in it, and none of that had been on the first road. So I tried to believe him. Then we went around a bend, and the headlights hit another yellow sign. 1,000 feet road ends. We both panicked. This time, Micah didn't keep going. He turned around before we even got close to the next sign, though we could already see the 500 feet sign shining farther down the road. But as we drove back, we realized we were still going downhill. That made no sense. We had already been driving downhill before we turned around. We should have been going back up. Then we started recognizing things from the first road. A single orange streetlight. A particular house with a number Micah remembered because he'd pointed it out earlier. But the curve warning signs were gone. The blue truck was gone. The road had changed again, or we had, or something had folded over itself in a way roads are not supposed to do. We stopped talking much after that. We just drove home. Neither of us is especially superstitious. We're not the kind of people who jump to ghosts or portals or anything like that. But we both felt the same awful wrongness on that road before we'd even really discussed it. We both saw different parts of it and had the same reaction. I still don't know what happened that night. Maybe there's some ordinary explanation. Maybe there isn't. All I know is that road felt like it didn't want us there, and the second time we saw that sign, it felt like it had found us again.
I
grew up in a small rural town in Mexico, in a little house where it was just my mom, my older sister Mariela, our dog Osito, and me. My dad was living in the United States at the time, working as hard as he could so he could send money back home and help us get by. He missed so much while he was away, but when my sister turned 15, he made sure she had a celebration no one in our town would forget. There was music, food, a huge cake, and what felt like the whole town gathered around us. It was one of those parties where even the air feels excited. And, of course, because it was her quinceañera, my sister received her last doll. In our tradition, that doll represents a girl leaving childhood behind and stepping into womanhood. My sister was so happy when she got it. I still remember exactly what it looked like. It was porcelain, with pale blonde curls, a soft peach dress, and a little matching straw hat. It was honestly beautiful. My sister and I shared a bedroom back then, and after the party was over, she brought the doll into our room and placed it beside her like it was something precious. I wanted so badly to touch it, but she wouldn't let me. Not even once. The next morning, she made her bed the way she always did, arranging her stuffed animals and dolls carefully. Then she placed the porcelain doll right in the center, like it was the queen of the whole room. For a few weeks, nothing strange happened. Every morning, my sister followed the same little routine. She made her bed, lined up her toys, and placed the doll in the middle. I watched from a distance, still wanting to touch it. Then one day, when my sister was out of the house, I decided I was finally going to do it. I walked over to the bed and touched the doll's face. Her porcelain skin was cold and smooth. I ran my fingers through her blonde curls and even adjusted her tiny hat. And then, the room got quiet. Not normal quiet, heavy quiet. I remember staring into her eyes, and I don't really know why. There was something empty about them, something that made my stomach tighten. I suddenly felt like I had done something I wasn't supposed to do. So I put her back exactly where she had been and left the room. That night, I went to bed like always. I said goodnight to my sister, and she had already moved all her toys down beside the bed, the way she usually did. Sometime while I was sleeping, I started dreaming about the doll. In the dream, she was looking straight at me. Her eyes were hollow, not angry, not sad, just empty. And somehow that was worse. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move. I kept trying to wake myself up, trying so hard, but I couldn't. When I finally opened my eyes, I still couldn't move. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. My whole body was frozen. I could see the room around me, but I couldn't lift a finger. I don't know how long it lasted. It felt like forever. Then, suddenly, I could move again. And when I did, I looked down and saw the doll on the floor. She was facing me, just sitting there, staring. I ran out of that room so fast and went straight to my mom's bed. I stayed there the rest of the night. The next morning, I was terrified to go back into our room, but I did. When I walked in, my sister was arranging her toys again. Only this time, she didn't put the doll in the center of the bed. She picked it up, turned it around, and placed it somewhere else in the room. We didn't say anything to each other, but I knew. I knew she was scared too. For months after that, I hated being alone in that bedroom. The doll would show up in different spots around the room, and my sister always thought I was the one moving it. I would cry and tell her, I only touched her that one time, but I was still the one who got blamed. Once, I was outside on the swing, and I swear I saw the doll watching me from near the house. I jumped off and ran back inside, only to find her sitting perfectly on my sister's bed. After a while, we stopped talking about it. We never told my mom. Years passed, and somehow we just learned to live with it. I refused to touch the doll again. I tried not to even look at her. Eventually, my family moved to the United States, and we left that doll behind in the old house. When my sister and I became adults, we finally talked about it. She told me she had dreamed about the doll too. She remembered the same thing I did, those empty eyes. She also admitted that the doll would end up in places where she knew she hadn't put it. At first, she really did think it was me, but now, looking back, she says she always knew something else was moving that doll. When we visit that old house now and stay in that room, we don't touch her. We turn her around and we leave her where she is, because that room feels like it belongs to her now. That is her space. I'm a grown adult now, and I still don't really know what I believe when it comes to the paranormal. I wouldn't say I'm someone who has all the answers. Honestly, I don't even know what to think about some of the things that have happened to me. But I've had more than a few strange experiences throughout my life, and this was the first one I can remember. My earliest memories start when I was about 4 years old, and I think the reason they begin there is because that was the first time I ever saw someone who had passed away. I grew up in a small rural village in Mexico. It was the kind of place where maybe a few hundred people lived, and everyone knew everyone. Most days, I played in my great-grandparents' yard because I loved being around my great-grandfather, Don Rafael. To me, he was just Grandpa Rafa. He would spread an old blanket under this big shade tree, and I would sit with him there for hours. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes he just watched me play. I remember feeling safe with him. One day, my mother took my hand and walked me to my great-grandparents' house. We went into a bedroom, and there were candles everywhere. The room was quiet, but full of people whispering and watching. My great-grandfather was lying on the bed. I sat beside him and looked at him. I remember not being scared. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't understand why everyone was so serious, or why they were looking at me the way they were. After that, life seemed to keep going, at least for me. I still went outside to the tree. I still talked to Grandpa Rafa there. One afternoon, I came running into the kitchen, so excited I could barely hold still. My mom was washing dishes, and I opened my hands in front of her. I told her, "Look, Grandpa gave me candy." There was candy in my palms, a lot of it. Bright little wrapped pieces, the kind children treasure like tiny jewels. My mother took one from my hand and smiled, but later she told me that smile was only for me. Inside, she felt something turn cold. The next day, I was heading outside again, and she asked me where I was going. I told her, "Grandpa is waiting for me under the tree." At first, my mother thought maybe he had come to say goodbye. She knew how close we were. She thought maybe, somehow, he was giving me comfort, or maybe I was giving him peace. But it didn't stop. For weeks, I kept going to that tree. I would lie there in the shade and talk as if someone was sitting right beside me. My mom tried to explain that he had died, but I would point and say, "No, he's there, look." That's when she started to worry. She said she began speaking out loud to him, telling him that if it was really him, he needed to move on and let me be. But nothing changed. Then she started to wonder if maybe it wasn't him at all. Eventually, she called a priest. He came to the house, blessed me, blessed the tree, and blessed the rooms. I don't know if that's what made it stop, but soon after, I stopped talking about Grandpa Rafa, and I wasn't allowed to go near that tree anymore. Years passed. When I was about 12, I went to the local market to buy sweets. As I got close, I saw an old man standing in line, leaning on a cane. He looked straight at me. I smiled at him. Then someone called my name, and I turned to see who it was. It was one of my friends. When I looked back, the old man was gone. Later that same day, I went to my great-grandmother's house, and there, in the corner, I saw the cane. The same cane. I touched it, and I just knew. I don't know how to explain that feeling, but I knew it belonged to the old man I had seen at the market. As an adult, my mother finally told me more about what happened back then. She said that when my great-grandfather was dying, he would ask for me. They would bring me to him, and I would play near his bed. She said that whenever I was there, he seemed to come back a little, like seeing me helped him hold on. After he passed, she thought I was only grieving in my own childlike way. She thought I missed him. But then came the candy. She said there had been no candy in the house. No one had given it to me. And when I said Grandpa gave it to me, she played along because she didn't want to frighten me. But from that day on, she was afraid. She told me, "I started to feel like it wasn't your grandfather anymore. I was scared something else was using his face." Then she said something I've never forgotten. "I was worried it would take your soul." She said she tried talking to it. She tried yelling at it. She even cursed at it. But nothing changed until the priest came. So what was it? Was it really my great-grandfather, staying just long enough to say goodbye? Was it something darker, pretending to be him? Or was it simply the way a little child tried to understand death before she even knew what death meant? I don't have an answer, but every time I think about him, I remember that old man at the market, leaning on his cane, looking right at me. And I remember smiling at him, like some quiet part of me already knew who he was. I think I was about 6 when this happened, maybe a little younger, and it's one of those memories that has never really loosened its grip on me. It was at my grandparents' house. I stayed there pretty often back then, usually when my mom had to work late or leave early for something the next morning. That night started completely normal. Nothing felt strange. I went to bed, fell asleep, and that should have been the end of it. But sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. I don't know why, but I suddenly felt like I needed to look out the window. My room was on the 2nd floor, so I got up, went over, and looked outside. My grandparents lived next to an old 4-H camp, and there was a narrow lane that led up to the gate. Right there, under one of the streetlights, was a man. Or at least, I thought it was a man. He was tall and very thin, wearing an old-fashioned coat. Not exactly a trench coat, but something in that family. He also had this long, drooping stocking cap on, the kind that hangs down the back with a little ball at the end. I remember it had stripes, though I can't remember the colors anymore. He had a huge, overstuffed pack on his back, and he was doing something with his hands. I couldn't see what. It looked like he was fiddling with something invisible, or working on some tiny object I couldn't make out. And I just stood there staring. I don't know how long it lasted. Maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Long enough that it felt wrong. Long enough that I knew I wasn't just glancing at someone walking by. Then he stopped moving his hands. He looked straight ahead for a second, and then he snapped his head up and looked directly at me. I still remember the feeling that went through me. It was like my whole spine turned cold and electric at the same time. I tried to keep looking, but he was staring right into my eyes. From where I was, maybe 15 or 20 feet away and 1 floor up, his face looked extremely pale, and his eyes had this dull glow to them, almost like the way a cat's eyes reflect light in the dark. I got scared and yelled, "Grandpa, help!" I only turned my head away for a couple of seconds. When I looked back, he was gone. Not walking away, not running, just gone. The lane was open and lit by streetlights. There weren't trees or bushes nearby where someone could have ducked behind. I looked everywhere, but there was nothing. My grandpa came running in, and I told him what I'd seen. He looked out the window, then went outside to check around. When he came back, he said there wasn't anyone there. Just the lane, the camp gate, and the empty night. He could tell I was still shaken, so he let me sleep in his room. He made me a little bed out of blankets on the floor beneath the skylight. I remember lying there, still wide awake, trying to calm down. Through the skylight, I could see part of the big maple tree outside. The wind was moving the branches a little. And then I saw him again. He was crouched on one of the branches, squatting there like he had always been there. I froze completely. I couldn't call out. I couldn't say, "There he is." I couldn't move. Because this was a different room, I couldn't see him as clearly this time. He looked more like a silhouette tucked into the tree. But the eyes were the same, that faint, unnatural glow. He just watched me. It felt like hours, though it was probably only a few minutes. Eventually, somehow, I managed to close my eyes. I must have fallen asleep like that. The next morning, I told my grandparents again about the man outside my bedroom window. They said it was probably someone walking around the camp, and that I just hadn't seen where he went. That did make me feel a little less crazy, because at least I knew I hadn't dreamed the first part. But I never told them about seeing him in the tree. I don't really know why. I think I just didn't want to talk about it. Saying it out loud would have made it too real. Over the years, that memory kept coming back, especially when people talked about strange events or paranormal encounters. I've tried looking into it, but I've never found anything that really matches. It wasn't a hat man thing. There was no fedora, no brimmed hat, nothing like that. It didn't feel evil exactly, just strange. Ancient maybe, out of place. His eyes weren't red, and I was too young to have any understanding of drugs or hallucinations or anything like that. Later, when I was around 11, I learned the camp had once been used as a prisoner of war camp for German soldiers during World War II. From what I've read, there doesn't seem to be any record of anything violent happening there. Supposedly, the men worked on farms nearby and were released after the war. So I don't know if that history has anything to do with what I saw. As an adult, I've asked my grandpa if he remembers that night. He always says yes. He remembers me being terrified. He remembers going outside to look, and he remembers not finding a single thing. So that's the story. I've never been able to explain it, and I've never met anyone who saw something quite like it. But if anyone has had a similar experience or has any idea what it might have been, I'd really like to hear about it. I went on a choir tour through Spain and southern France back in 2007. We began in Madrid and eventually made our way toward Toulouse and the Occitanie region. But the experience I still think about most happened in Lourdes, France. Even before we got there, while we were still in Spain, I kept having these strange moments of déjà vu. Not just little flickers either. They felt more like memories brushing up against me from somewhere I couldn't quite name. One of the oddest moments was at the Cathedral of Burgos. As our guide walked us through, I found myself talking with her about the church as if I already knew it. The layout, the details, the feeling of the place. It all felt strangely familiar. At the end of the tour, she looked at me and said, "You know a lot." The next day, a few people from our group who hadn't paid for the tour wanted to see it, so I took them back and basically gave them the same tour myself. I knew where to stop, what to point out, even the order she had done it in. It felt effortless, which made it even more unsettling. But the clearest paranormal experience of the trip happened later, in Lourdes. Lourdes is a small town in southwest France, best known for Saint Bernadette, a teenage shepherd girl who said she saw visions of the Virgin Mary in 1858. On our first day there, our guide mentioned that long before it became a Christian pilgrimage site, Lourdes had been a Roman outpost, and there had once been a temple connected to a water goddess. That detail stayed with me, because Lourdes is full of water imagery. Everywhere you turn, there's water. Holy water, bottles shaped like Mary, streams of pilgrims moving through the town, the baths where people go hoping for healing. It's as if the whole place is flowing. And people really do come there for healing. You see groups of sick pilgrims everywhere, many in wheelchairs, some on stretchers. The most important place is the grotto, where Bernadette had her visions, with the church built above it. I'm not Catholic, but the story of the place had drawn me in. I wanted to go down to the grotto and just feel it for myself. When I arrived, I couldn't go in right away because it was the scheduled time for people on stretchers. In front of the grotto, there was an open space, then several rows of benches, then more space behind them, all enclosed by fencing. Most of the center benches were full, so I found a place at the very back, near the fence, and sat down to wait. The moment I sat, I felt this buzzing. At first it was subtle, but then it grew stronger and stronger until it felt like it was moving through my whole body. The pressure became so intense that my head was pushed downward toward my knees. From the outside, I probably looked like I was praying or genuflecting, but I wasn't doing it on purpose. And through that vibration, I heard a voice. It said, "You will see where Bernadette first saw the lady." I didn't know what to do with that. I'm usually skeptical of things like that, even when they happen to me. So I just held the thought gently and waited. A little while later, the stretchers were moved out of the area, and people began lining up from the center benches to enter the grotto. I moved forward and sat on one of those benches, starting at the left side. As more people came in, I slid along to make room until I ended up at the far right end. Sitting there, I thought maybe I should offer some kind of prayer, or at least something respectful. Since I was on a choir tour, I began silently singing the choral Ave Maria we had been performing. And as I did, the buzzing became overwhelming. Then I started to cry. Not loudly, just silently, with tears coming and coming. The people on the bench around me seemed to understand somehow. No one spoke to me. No one touched me. They simply sat there and gave me space in this incredibly tender, wordless way. When the crying finally passed, I knew I didn't need to go into the grotto. Whatever I had come there for, I had already received it. So I reached down to pick up my backpack. And that's when I saw it. There was a bronze plaque set into the ground right beneath where I had been sitting. It said that this was the spot where Saint Bernadette first saw the Virgin Mary on February 11th, 1858. I had been sitting on that exact place the entire time. I've basically lived in the same house my whole life. My parents built it when I was little, and it's just this normal suburban house in the ACT in Australia. Nothing dramatic, nothing old and crumbling. It was built on cleared farm paddocks, so you wouldn't really expect it to have any kind of history clinging to it. But even so, over the years, strange things have come and gone there. My grandmother, Grace, was always spiritually sensitive. She had seen ghosts before, and she believed in helping them move on. My mum, Michelle, is sensitive too, but she doesn't like admitting it. She'll acknowledge just enough to say, "Yes, something is there," and then she'll shut the door on the whole idea. Me, I've never actually seen anything clearly, which is funny because there were times I wanted to, especially in places that were supposed to be haunted. But I've always been able to sense things and hear things really clearly. The worst experience happened when I was about 10. I was in my bedroom at night. My bed was pushed up against the wall on one side, and I was lying facing the wall because that was my rule. I didn't want to roll over and see something standing there if something happened to be there. I wasn't asleep. I wasn't even close to drifting off. Then suddenly, I felt this huge dark presence behind me. It wasn't like getting chills. It wasn't that prickly feeling people talk about. It was heavier than that. It felt physical, almost warm in this smoky, suffocating way, and the whole room seemed to go silent around it. Like all the ordinary nighttime sounds had been swallowed. I knew, instantly, that whatever it was bad. I didn't feel it staring at me exactly, but I knew it was focused on me, and I knew it hated me. Not in a vague way, it felt personal. After a few seconds, I managed to call out for my mom. It came out weak because I was terrified, but I yelled as loudly as I could. The second I did, the force of it faded a little. Not gone, just less intense. It was like the main weight of it pulled back, but this thick residue stayed in the air around my voice and around my bed. I could still feel it there, and I had this awful awareness that it knew I knew it was there. My mom didn't get up right away. She was a couple of rooms away, and I could hear her calling back to me, not really understanding how scared I was. And somehow, that thing seemed almost amused. It didn't move at first. It just stayed there while I kept calling for her, refusing to turn around, refusing to look. Then slowly, it began to drift away. Not walk, not vanish. It sort of slid out of the room, like smoke pulling itself through a crack. By the time my mom actually got to me, it was gone. There was nothing left for anyone else to sense. No chill, no weird atmosphere. Just me, absolutely shaken. That was the scariest thing that ever happened to me in that house. But it wasn't the only thing. There were others I used to call the roommates. Growing up, I always had the sense that there were maybe 3 or 4 different presences around the house. One of them hated me being in the lounge room at night. That room always felt wrong after dark. Once, when I was about 11, I had a friend sleep over. He was lying on the couch bed in the lounge room, watching TV, and he saw a hand reflected in the screen. It looked like it was reaching over the back of the couch. Nobody else was in the room with him. Then there were 2 others that felt more spread out through the house. They weren't as aggressive. They were just there. I'd hear footsteps at night, heavy enough to make the carpet shift and crinkle. I'd get that feeling of something moving around outside my bedroom door. It made me avoid leaving my room at night, and when I did have to go out, I'd rush. My mom always brushed it off. But later, after my parents moved out and I started renting the house from them, the roommates became more noticeable. They'd bang on walls, or they'd send out these strange little pulses in the atmosphere, just enough to grab my attention. And weirdly, it was usually helpful. Like if I'd left a stove knob turned on, I'd hear a sudden knock from a part of the house that never made noise. If I had a window open and was about to leave, something would pull my attention toward it. It was never in places with wiring or pipes or anything that could easily explain it. Eventually, I started joking out loud that their rent was keeping me from burning the house down or getting kicked out. I'd tell them, "You know, if I lose this place, you're homeless too." I never felt like they were good, exactly, but they didn't feel evil either. Then, at one point, the energy in the house started changing. There were more negative things around, things that made me feel afraid before I even opened a door. I'd stand in the hallway and just know something was on the other side. Certain rooms felt like something was waiting in them, not just present, but hunting. That was different. When I told my mom, she said I should sage the house. So I did. I went through the whole place and saged every room. And after that, the roommates were gone. All of them. Even the nasty one in the lounge room. I spent a lot of my 20s being the person people called when they thought something in their house needed to be cleared out. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I do. I've always had one foot planted pretty firmly in skepticism. Most of the time, a haunted house is just an old house with bad pipes, loose floorboards, and a draft that knows how to make an entrance. But I'd been involved with occult work and folk magic for most of my life, and word had gotten around that I didn't scare easily. Also, I didn't charge anyone, so I got invited into a lot of places where people were frightened, and I did my best to help. Most of it was ordinary. Some of it wasn't. I do believe there are things just outside the edge of what we can see. I don't think we catch glimpses of them often, but I think it happens. There was this spiritualist camp a few hours from where I lived, and I used to go there when I needed a little break from regular life. It had an old hotel that was advertised very cheerfully as haunted. But honestly, it never felt frightening to me. It felt small and warm and strange in a charming way, with this huge wraparound porch where you could sit with a book and hear every creak of the building breathing around you. The whole camp was tiny. The hotel, a few little shops, some cottages, and not much else. If you wanted food after a certain hour, your best bet was a vending machine with a heroic amount of dust on it. I'd gone enough times that I knew people there. That particular weekend, I was staying at the hotel with my mom. The building was old enough that the rooms were a little uneven. Same price for all of them, but every other room had a larger bathroom. The smaller bathrooms were so small you practically had to negotiate with the sink to turn around. So my mom and I booked 2 of the larger rooms. I think they were even numbered, with 1 room between us. When we arrived, I noticed my room looked emptier than usual. The hotel seemed to be changing furniture or doing some kind of slow-motion remodeling. There was a bed, a little table, maybe a chair, but not much else. At the time, I didn't think much of it. That first day was exactly what you'd expect from a weekend at a spiritualist camp. I caught up with friends, bought a little bag of crystals I absolutely did not need, wandered through the shops, and read on the porch until the light went soft. That night, my friend Mara came by my room. The rooms had 2 doors, one that opened into the hotel hallway and one that opened out onto the porch. She knocked on the porch door, and somehow we ended up upstairs in an area where there weren't any guest rooms. I was wearing this long white nightgown, and the hotel had all this antique, slightly eerie decor, so Mara wanted to take some pictures. Nothing serious, just dramatic little ghost girl photos for fun. There was an old fainting couch up there, so I lay down on it while she took a few pictures. Then we laughed about it, went back downstairs, and each went off to bed. The next morning, I woke up and started getting ready. While I was brushing my hair, I noticed the upper left side of my head was sore. Really sore. Tender in that deep, bruised way, like I'd been knocked there. But I hadn't hit my head. There wasn't a headboard. There wasn't anything above me or beside me that made sense. I hadn't fallen. I hadn't woken up in pain during the night. I was confused, but it didn't seem serious, so I let it go. The second day was more of the same. I tried to get lunch at the little hotel restaurant, but it was closed. I bought a singing bowl from one of the shops. I visited another friend. I spent more time on the porch. That night, I went to bed without modeling dramatically on any antique furniture. Then the next morning, I woke up with a red, swollen welt on the left side of my forehead, right at the hairline. Same side. It was tender to touch, and later it bruised. That's when I stopped being casual about it. I spent hours in that room trying to figure out how I could have done it to myself. I looked at the furniture. There wasn't much of it. I considered sleepwalking, even though I've never done that in my life. But even if I had, what would I have walked into? The doors were locked. Nothing in the room was high enough or positioned in a way that made sense. I sleep on my right side too, so the left side of my forehead, the side that had been hit twice, would have been exposed while I was asleep. I must have looked absolutely ridiculous. This woman in her 20s pacing around an almost empty hotel room, trying to reenact a head injury with no weapon, no furniture, and no suspect except the air itself. I came up with nothing. Before we checked out, I told the woman at the front desk what had happened. The front desk was inside the gift shop, surrounded by crystals, tarot decks, fairy statues, incense, and all the usual beautiful little witchy clutter. She just looked at me and said, "The hotel isn't haunted." And honestly, I still don't know whether that was the official answer she was supposed to give, or if she genuinely believed it, or if she'd said it 1,000 times and wanted no part of whatever I was describing. It was one of the strangest exchanges I've ever had. My mom and I were only booked for the weekend, so we checked out that morning. I stayed at that hotel again after that visit, and it never happened again. No bruises, no sore spots, nothing. Just those 2 mornings. I even mentioned it to my therapist later, expecting her to be the reasonable voice in the room. She listened quietly and then said, "Do you think it followed you home?" Which was not, I will tell you, the comforting clinical response I had been hoping for. I think the reason that weekend has stayed with me so strongly is because, in all the strange situations I've been in, I had never been physically touched in a way that left a mark. I'd heard things, I'd felt things, I'd seen things out of the corner of my eye that made the room feel suddenly too small. But this was different. This was contact. And I don't know what caused it. I still don't. But it changed the way I think about the unseen. Seeing something move in the dark is frightening, yes. Hearing footsteps when no one is there is frightening. But being asleep, completely vulnerable, and waking up marked by something you can't explain? That message landed very clearly. Whatever it was, it wanted me to know it could reach me. I'm 28 now, and I was born in Italy. My family was pretty ordinary on the surface. I had one sister, Elena, who was a few years older than me, and for the most part, life looked normal from the outside. But inside the house, it wasn't always peaceful. My parents argued a lot. It never became physical, thankfully, but there was plenty of shouting, insults, and tension hanging in the air. So my sister and I both learned early on that being outside was easier than being home. That's important, because it explains why I spent so much time at my cousin's place when I was younger. And it's also worth saying that my sister and I were completely different when it came to anything paranormal. She loved that stuff. She wanted something strange to happen to her. She wanted a story. Me? Absolutely not. Give me true crime, serial killers, dangerous people, whatever. I can handle that. But ghosts, spirits, things you can't explain? No, thank you. Which is funny because for some reason, those things kept happening to me. Never to her. The first place where it really started was my cousin Marco's house. I spent a lot of time there from around 12 or 13 until I was about 18. Sometimes I stayed for days, sometimes weeks. Anything to avoid being home during the worst of the arguments. His house wasn't really just a house. It was more like a villa. There was a huge lake in the middle of the property, with land all around it. If you walked slowly around the lake without exploring, just following the path, it could take about an hour. The place was old, too. Historically, it had once been near an ancient Roman port before the landscape changed. The sea wasn't far away at all. The house itself had 2 floors, and when we were younger, my cousins and I always slept in the same room. It didn't matter if we had to bring in extra beds or squeeze together. The house was big, isolated, and surrounded by darkness at night. None of us wanted to sleep alone. At first, nothing happened. Then, when I was 13, I had my first experience. That night, there were 4 of us sleeping in the room. Me, my younger cousin Luca, my older cousin Marco, and my aunt. It was a completely normal night. Nothing strange before bed. No weird feelings. No bad atmosphere. We just went to sleep. Then, in the middle of the night, I woke up. No sound, no reason. I just opened my eyes and sat up. And in front of me, there was something. I call it something because I still don't really know how to describe it. It didn't have a clear face or a solid shape. The closest I can get is this. Imagine someone standing there with a white sheet or blanket draped over them, so you can only see the outline underneath. And somehow, I knew it was female. I couldn't see a face, I couldn't see details, but the shape felt feminine, and I just knew. The strange part is that I didn't panic. Normally, I'm a very rational person, maybe too rational. So instead of screaming or waking everyone up, I just sat there and tried to explain it away. My first thought was, maybe it's just a blanket on the chair. But then I looked down and realized my blanket was on me. It was winter. I was using it. Then I thought, maybe it's the dog. They had a few dogs, and one of them was a French bulldog with a white patch on its back. Maybe he was curled up on the chair, and my tired brain was turning him into something else. So I looked around. The dog was asleep on the bed beside me, stretched across my cousin's legs. I looked back. The thing was still there. It hadn't moved at all. I stared at it. It stared back, or at least it felt that way. And then, because apparently my teenage brain had no survival instinct, I just shrugged, lay back down, and went to sleep. The next morning, when I fully realized what had happened, I almost freaked out. I kept asking myself why I reacted like that. Why didn't I wake anyone? Why didn't I leave the room? But in that exact moment, I hadn't felt threatened. I hadn't felt fear. It felt peaceful, almost unimportant. And that might be the strangest part of all. I know what time it was, too. There was a TV in front of the bed with a small decoder underneath it that always showed the time. It was 3 a.m. The second experience happened about a year later, when I was 14. Again, it was at my cousin's villa. This time, it was late afternoon in winter, around the end of January. I was with Marco, my aunt, and my uncle, and we were walking around the lake. It was about 5 p.m., so there was still light outside. Everything felt normal. My cousin and I were walking a little ahead of the adults, just a few meters, close enough that all 4 of us could still talk without raising our voices. Eventually, we reached an old stone bridge. You had to cross it to continue around the lake because water passed underneath it. We started walking across, slowly, casually. Then Marco and I heard a voice. A woman's voice. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was soft, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. But it kept repeating, and it was calling our names. Both of our names. The sound seemed to move from left to right in front of us, like someone was walking away while whispering, and the voice was getting farther and farther away. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. Of course, the first thing we did was look back at the adults. We thought they were messing with us. But while we could still hear the voice, they were behind us having their own conversation, completely normal. So Marco and I turned back around, moved closer together, and kept walking. Neither of us said anything. What could we say? By the time we reached the end of the bridge, the voice had faded. Maybe 5 seconds later, my aunt called out from behind us. She asked why we hadn't stopped the old man in front of us. But there had been no old man. She said an elderly man had walked right in front of us, crossing from left to right. She described him as wearing strange clothes, old-fashioned, like from another time. The moment she said that, Marco and I ran off the bridge to see if we could find him. There was nobody. No footsteps. No movement. Nothing. And that area made it almost impossible for someone to disappear normally. At the end of the bridge, there was grass and the path continuing forward. On the right side, you drop straight toward the lake. On the left, there was a little land, but then a stone wall surrounded the property. It was about 8 or 9 meters tall, covered in bushes and branches. Anyone trying to climb or push through it would have made a lot of noise. We told the adults about the woman's voice. They hadn't heard it. They told us about the old man. We hadn't seen him. And after that, we just finished the walk and never really talked about it again. The third experience was absolutely our fault because we were teenagers, and teenagers are experts at opening doors they shouldn't even knock on. It was Halloween night. I was 16. Same property, same cousin, same general area. At the time, we had gotten really into Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing games. So, naturally, we decided Halloween would be the perfect night to do something scary. There was an old Merle building on the property that we called the Towers. In medieval times, it had apparently been a small structure with 2 towers, one on each side. By then, it was being renovated. Since it was inside my cousin's property, we figured it was fine to go in as long as we didn't break anything. We brought a Vampire the Masquerade book, some candles and flashlights, and a few things to set the mood. The plan was to play inside the old building. There were 4 of us: me, Marco, Luca, and a friend of ours named Davide. We left around 9 p.m. By the time we reached the building on foot, it was close to 11. The ground floor was unfinished. Concrete, dust, gravel everywhere. No doors or windows yet, just openings covered by those green construction nets workers use to block the view. Below the ground floor, there was a basement, about the same size as the main level. We didn't go down there. It was pitch black, flooded up to the ankles, and looked awful. We knew it was just where workers had been handling the old foundations, but still, no thank you. One tower was still standing on the right side. The left one had already been demolished. At some point, we split up. Marco and Luca went up the tower stairs. Davide and I stayed on the ground floor waiting for them. That's when things started going wrong. First, we heard something fall from the tower above. We assumed it was my cousins trying to scare us, so we laughed it off. We expected that. Then we saw something outside the building. A dark figure ran past one of the openings. The green nets were torn in places, and our flashlights were pointed in that direction, so we could see enough of the outside. It wasn't detailed. It had no face, no clear shape, just a short, human-like shadow moving fast across the opening. Davide and I got nervous, but we still tried to act brave. Then something else fell from the tower. We shouted up at my cousins to stop, telling them it wasn't funny anymore. And right after that, the most impossible thing happened. Dust started lifting from the ground around us. Then footprints began appearing in the dust. Not old footprints, new ones. Right in front of us. They moved in a circle around where we were standing, like someone invisible was running around us. But there was nobody there. Nobody. We could see the footprints forming one after another. We could see the dust moving. That was enough. Davide and I ran out of the building, terrified, and waited outside for my cousins. They came down a few minutes later, laughing. We swore at them and told them we knew they had been throwing things down from the tower. They admitted they had thrown a brick. But when we mentioned the second thing falling, and the shadow, and the footprints, they looked genuinely confused. They kept saying they hadn't thrown anything else. They hadn't seen anything. And when they came back down, nothing was different except for the brick they had dropped. After that, we left immediately and decided watching a movie at home was a much better Halloween plan. The rest of the night was quiet. There were other smaller things over the years, too. Not full stories exactly, but strange moments. I had dreams that later came true. Once, I dreamed about my aunt having a baby almost a year before it happened. I knew the baby's name, the sex, and even the day the child would be born. I was right. Another time, the same thing happened with another aunt, more than a year in advance. Again, I dreamed the name, the sex, and the birth date. I was right that time too. Then there was one night at my parents' house when I suddenly woke up at 3 a.m. with this horrible feeling in my chest. My first thought was, I need to call my cousins. There was no reason for it. No dream I remembered. No message. Just that awful feeling and the sudden need to call them. But I talked myself out of it. Because who calls people at 3 in the morning because of a gut feeling? The next morning, my mother rushed into my room and told me something had happened. Lightning had struck my cousin's kitchen, started a fire, and almost hit the gas canister. It happened around 3:30 a.m. Thankfully, Luca had woken up to go to the bathroom, saw the fire, and woke everyone before it became worse. Nothing terrible happened, but I still think about it. And I've promised myself that if I ever get a feeling like that again, I'm calling. For a while, I used to meditate and do certain spiritual practices. I don't know if that had anything to do with the dreams or the experiences, but after I stopped, everything became much quieter. Maybe it's connected. Maybe it isn't. But honestly, I'm not in a hurry to find out.